Scientists discovered something Atlantis-like near Australia. There used to be an entire continent that's now underwater. Here's what happened to it. Around 70,000 years ago, during the last ice age, there was a huge landmass called Sahul. It was located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. This ancient supercontinent connected what we now know as Australia, New Guinea, Tasmania, and the Aru Islands into one giant piece of land. Imagine lush tropical rainforests surrounded by beautiful mountains. Sahul's tallest mountains were in the New Guinea highlands, with peaks reaching over 13,000 feet. This beautiful place was home to a variety of unique animals, most of which were pouched creatures. But back then, they weren't just koalas and kangaroos. Sahul was filled with different types of grazers, burrowers, scavengers, and predators. It was home to a huge diprotodon, a powerful hunter Thiosolio, and a horrifying Megalania, a creature that's much larger than any living lizard today. It was a unique place because the rest of the world was filled with placental animals at the time, like wolves, elephants, and humans. In Sahul, the only normal mammals were bats and rodents. But not all its parts were the same. The Timor, Arafura, and Carpentaria regions were covered by hot savanna and dry forests. It looked kinda like modern Australia, hot air deserts with scrubland, steppe, and temperate forests along the eastern coast. Back then, people were migrating all across the world. They made an incredible journey from Southeast Asia to Sahul and first arrived here from 60 to 45,000 years ago. They mostly traveled by foot and crossed the sea using bamboo rafts and simple boats. They came there from an ancient landmass called Sunda, which includes parts of Southeast Asia. They traveled across a series of islands known as Wallachia and eventually spread across Sahul. And it wasn't a small journey. Sahul was huge, around 4.1 million square miles. That's bigger than the USA or Canada. It stretched from the equator to around the southern part of New Zealand. So they arrived in what is now Australia and became Australia's first people. Scientists think that Sahul had a population of 500,000. We've discovered cave paintings that date back around 40,000 years. It's a hunting scene depicting an anoa, or miniature buffalo, facing figures of humans and animals. Researchers are trying to figure out how these early settlers moved across Sahul and where we might find archaeological evidence of their journey. To do this, they created a landscape evolution model. The simulation showed how Sahul changed between 75,000 and 35,000 years ago. It showed potential migration routes and archaeological sites. Humans likely traveled along coastlines and rivers. But how did Sahul get submerged off the coast of Australia, similar to the mythical Atlantis? During the last ice age, much of the Earth's water was locked up in large ice sheets and glaciers. The sea levels were much lower than they are today. After that, the global temperatures increased. The ice sheets melted and the sea levels rose, flooding the land bridges that once connected different parts of Sahul together. About 8,000 years ago, New Guinea separated from mainland Australia, and then, about 6,000 years ago, Tasmania did the same. We still can explore the underwater parts of Sahul thanks to new technology. Divers explore and collect samples directly from the ocean floor. Underwater drones can go to places that are too deep or dangerous for humans to explore. And with sonar mapping, scientists use sound waves to create maps of the ocean floor. It's like using an echo to see what's underwater. The sound waves bounce off the seabed and come back, helping us create a picture of what it looks like. Deep underwater, archaeologists have found stone tools and other artifacts. They also discovered fossils of animals like Diprotodon and Thylasolio. By studying the underwater terrain of Sahul, they learned about the ancient rivers, lakes, and coastlines that existed during the Ice Age. But Sahul isn't the only underwater continent. Sahul isn't the only hidden gem of Southeast Asia. Take Sundaland, a place made up of Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and some other islands. This place was crazy huge during the Ice Age, but now almost fully underwater. Almost, but not entirely. The parts above the ocean are teeming with life. If you like birds, check this place out. It has almost a fifth of the world's bird species. You can spot colorful birds like the Java hawk eagle and the Bali starling among the lush forests. It's also a home to a fourth of Earth's fish species. Sundaland's waters are a haven for marine life, even the most exotic animals like the Asian arowanas. It's also a treasure trove of flowers. That's where you can find Rafflesia and Titan arum, the world's largest flowers. This makes it very similar to Zealandia. Zealandia is a long, narrow piece of land about half the size of Australia. It broke from Antarctica about 100 million years ago. Just like Sundaland, it isn't fully underwater. 7% of it stayed above sea level. This sticking out little piece is what we now call New Zealand, along with Stewart Island and some smaller islands. These pieces of Zealandia are lush and warm. They're packed with volcanoes, mountain ranges, beautiful natural geysers, and hot springs. Local people, Maori, use these hot springs for cooking. People place corn, eggs, and vegetables in baskets and lower them directly in the hot springs. Sometimes they cook food in a pit oven using heated rocks. Another hidden world is known as Argoland. This mysterious landmass was once part of Australia, back when dinosaurs chilled around. It drove scientists crazy for decades. They knew it existed because it left a huge stretch on the ancient seafloor, the Argo Abyssal Plain. About 155 million years ago, it broke off from Australia, saying bye-bye. The continent drifted somewhere north, and when it reached Southeast Asia, it just vanished. Scientists had no idea where it went, but recently they finally found its remains. Turns out, poor Argoland's lower parts started drowning into the Sunda Trench, a horrifyingly deep oceanic pit. The Earth's crust sunk into the mantle. Meanwhile, the upper parts of Argoland were pushed upward, grabbing the younger rocks on land. Because of this, Argoland broke apart into a bunch of smaller pieces. These pieces formed parts of Borneo, Java, Sulawesi, and other regions. The remains are buried under Indonesia and Myanmar. Imagine a colossal landmass the size of Greenland, Greater Adria. Its journey began about 240 million years ago when it broke away from the supercontinent Gondwana. It started moving north, and after 100 million years of enjoying the warm seas, it suddenly crashed into Europe and shattered into pieces. Most of these pieces went deep into the Earth's mantle, but some were scraped off and became part of mountain ranges like the Alps. Today, the remnants of Greater Adria are scattered across more than 30 countries, from Spain to Iran. That's why they're hard to look for. Seychelles was also once part of Gondwana. Yep, these idyllic islands are sitting atop of the ancient continent. We know a lot about it because of its fascinating granite outcrops. 100 years ago, Alfred Wegener discovered continental drift, but no one believed him. These granite outcrops helped him prove that he's not crazy and that tectonic plates really are moving. The Seychelles broke off from India and Madagascar and eventually became a sad loner in the Indian Ocean. This probably happened because of some insanely active volcanoes in the Deccan Traps. But now, the islands are home to unique species both on land and in the coral reefs nearby. Mauritius broke off from India after the dinosaur wiping. Along its journey, it stretched into a long ribbon-like shape and also broke into pieces. Now it's all scattered beneath the Indian Ocean. Scientists stumbled upon this lost land by studying tiny ancient crystals called zircons. These zircons are like time capsules. They date back an astonishing 660 million to 2 billion years. That's even older than Mirages itself. These ancient crystals hinted that there's another Atlantis somewhere nearby. Turns out there are hidden continents all around the world, and maybe we'll discover more of them in the future.
Imagine you've booked a tour through the jungles of Costa Rica. All of a sudden, you stumble upon a huge stone sphere, nearly the length of a king-sized bed in diameter. How on earth did it end up there? And what does it symbolize? You immediately ask your guide. He's not as amazed as you are and tells you that there are actually several hundreds of them scattered across the south of the country. The mysterious stone spheres don't have an official name. The locals simply call them las bolas, which means balls in Spanish, while historians refer to them as Diquis spheres, after the culture that produced them. Scientists have studied the sediment layers of the Earth around them and estimate that the earliest were made around the year 600 CE, and the newest ones date to the year 1000 CE. Many of the spheres were relocated after their initial discovery, and that's why archaeologists can't date them precisely. The Diquis culture completely disappeared shortly after they were discovered by the Spanish in the 16th century. Unlike the Mayas and the Aztecs, the myths or legends of these peoples didn't survive, so they cannot explain the existence of the mysterious orbs. More than 300 of these objects have been discovered so far, with some being smaller than 1 inch in diameter, and the largest measures 6.6 feet in diameter, standing taller than most humans. Although there are ones made from limestone, most spheres were carved out of a coarse version of basalt, a type of rock that forms when lava cools rapidly. Some orbs weigh up to 15 tons, and in most cases, their surface is smooth to the touch, although there are coarse, mostly unfinished pieces. If we throw away the theory that river erosion naturally sculpted the spheres, the ancient people seem to have created them by hammering boulders with other rocks. Once they got the rough shape they were aiming for, they would polish the rock to perfection, using techniques such as controlled fracture and grinding. The mysterious spheres are located in the Diquis Delta, on the coast of the Pacific Ocean. Most of them can be found in a place called Farm 6, which, alongside 3 other sites, was proclaimed a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2014. The area contains other finds from the pre-Columbian era, such as paved areas, burial sites, and mounds. For centuries, the stone balls were hidden under a thick layer of sediment that protected them against the elements and looters until they were unearthed during the 1930s. The company that owned the land was clearing the rainforest for banana plantations when they stumbled upon these unusual stone constructions. Some were damaged by bulldozers, and some by workers trying to pry them open, as they believed there was gold hidden inside. It took a while before the authorities intervened to stop further damage to the finds. Doris Stone, the daughter of an executive of the company that owned the land, was the first to study the spheres. In 1943, she published an article in a leading American archaeological journal, turning the world's attention to the orbs. Expeditions soon followed, and archaeologists were immediately able to determine that the stone formations were human-made, probably created by the ancient indigenous population of Costa Rica. To this day, no one has been able to fully explain their function in a scientific way. It means there's still room for some wild theories about the sphere's origins and true purpose. The most popular theory in the scientific community is that the stone spheres served as decorations and status symbols, as many of them were found near the houses of chieftains. Local tribal leaders were also laid to rest with some of the smaller balls, so these stone formations were definitely associated with power in some way. Chiseling a boulder to perfection involved a lot of labor and planning, and only powerful individuals could afford it at the time. The other popular theory is that the boulders were used for astronomical observations. Individual spheres represented stars or planets, like a primitive map of the night sky. Since they were perfectly round, it was easy to roll them around. Before the jungle engulfed them, the area where they were found was a flat alluvial plain, ideal for rolling large boulders around. Another version of this theory suggests that the stones were used as boundary markers, much like modern border stones, which are also mostly made from stone. Finally, Legends from other tribes that lived in the area tell of how the spheres were cannonballs that the deity of thunder used to drive away the deity of winds and hurricanes. We still don't know the original purpose of the Costa Rican spheres, but they remain an important part of the country's national identity. The National Museum in the Costa Rican capital, San Jose, has 6 of them in its courtyard. Many other spheres have become prized garden decorations for wealthy Costa Ricans. There's even one at Harvard University. More than a millennium after they were created, the mysterious stone spheres of Costa Rica are still associated with power and wealth. In terms of numbers, the stone orbs are not perfectly round. They are rated as nearly perfect, at 96% spherical in shape. And while even that is pretty impressive, the spheres of Costa Rica are not the only ones of their kind. Nearly a decade ago, workers came across mysterious giant stone spheres deep underground in a coal mine in northern Asia. The surface of the spheres, which measured a little over the length of a human footstep in diameter, was unusually smooth, and people tried to explain it somehow. Some were certain they were out of this world, and others suggested the spheres were actually petrified dinosaur eggs. Scientists quickly put an end to further discussion, as it turned out that the mysterious spheres were concretions. Those are rock formations that take millions of years to form deep underground. Think of a pebble that picks up snow as it rolls down a hill. That's how concretions are made. Groundwater, rich in sediment and minerals, flows around the sediment, slowly shaping it into a perfect orb. The process is quite common in nature, but most concretions are fairly small. The spheres found in the coal mine grew to their size in the mineral-rich ground, and they were big enough to get the press and the general public interested. Another possible case of concretions is the massive stone spheres found in the Visoko Valley in Bosnia. Samir Osmanagic, better known as the Bosnian Indiana Jones, was the first to explore those objects about as wide as the length of a London bus. He believes the stone spheres were carved by a lost civilization that lived in the area 1,000 years ago. The reddish color of the orbs, though, is proof to geologists that they are indeed concretions, rich in iron content. The Moki marbles, found in rural Utah, are similar in color to the Bosnian spheres. These tiny concretions are the size of toy marbles and consist of a sandstone core and a shell made out of hematite, an iron ore. In South Africa, miners have come across Klerksdorp spheres, which are similar in shape and size to Moki marbles. The only difference is that these ones formed inside volcanic sediments and ash. The most intriguing among human-made tiny spheres are probably the orbs found on several Greek islands. Scientists discovered 700 stones smaller than golf balls near the Bronze Age site of Akrotiri on the island of Santorini. They believe that the finds were between 3,600 and 4,500 years old. When they compared all the stones' variations in size and color, the archaeologists concluded that these enigmatic stones could have easily been the oldest board game ever made. With the help of artificial intelligence, scientists are now trying to work out the rules of this game.
The South Pole is more than penguins and endless snow. There's a hidden ghost world within it. Look, it's right here on the globe. Don't confuse Antarctica with the Arctic, which is at the top of our maps. Much smaller in size, and let's face it, way less mysterious. The ice sheet covering Antarctica is about 1 to 3 miles thick, which is up to 16 Eiffel Towers stacked on each other. This massive blanket hides the true features and contours of Antarctica's land. We still don't know much about this mysterious continent, and it is ice and snow that are to blame. We still don't even know the true shape and size of this continent. Mapping Antarctica without some huge shovels is an incredibly hard task. But satellites learned to penetrate the ice with their cameras. And now we know there's actually an enormous, dramatic ancient landscape beneath the snow. the ghost of the past. About 90 million years ago, Antarctica was a much warmer place. It was actually a lush rainforest with tons of plants and probably teeming with life. It even had rivers flowing through it. Then the ice came. This happened about 34 million years ago, during the transition from the Eocene to the Oligocene, when our planet cooled significantly. It was the beginning of one of our several ice ages. The land remained, but now was hidden under ice and snow that got thicker and thicker. To a regular eye, Antarctica turned into a white desert, vast, flat, and featureless. Time went on. This massive ice sheet moved around, smoothing and shifting the ground beneath it. Over the millions of years, it changed what the land looked like. Now, if we looked under the ice, it wouldn't hold any signs of the original South Pole, except for one place. In areas where the ice is especially thick and doesn't move much, like in East Antarctica, it has actually worked the other way around. It became like a super thick blanket that protects the land. Normally, things like wind or rain slowly wear away the ground over time, changing its shape. But since we have this protective ice blanket, it prevents these natural processes from reaching the stuff underneath. So, the ground stayed almost the same for millions of years, like it's been frozen in time. This special area near the Aurora and Schmidt subglacial basins has become the ghost of Antarctica's landscape. This place was barely touched even since it was first covered in snow 34 million years ago. This is a historical footprint, a place that can tell us what Antarctica's ground looked like before it became a freezing nightmare. As scientists peered under East Antarctica, they saw an amazing ghost. The traces of the rivers that were flowing there millions of years ago, various valleys, and some weird little islands, as well as 3 big chunks of land shaped like the letter U. Hey, what's that all about? You see, the continents on our planet are moving constantly, sliding along the red-hot lava mantle like cereal on milk. Over history, they came together and broke apart several times. Hundreds of millions of years ago, several continents were a part of one enormous Gondwana. Antarctica was one of them. It used to be one huge landmass. But when Gondwana broke apart, the poor continent got stretched by tectonic forces. Parts of land were pulled away from each other. Whoosh! And they got torn apart. And that's how we got these big chunks or blocks of land under thick layers of ice. In any case, scientists now want to explore this ghost a bit more. But to study it deeply, they need to actually drill down through the ice, like using a straw to get to the bottom of a thick shake. This will help them pick up some rocks and dirt from way below to learn more about the Earth's history and climate. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent in the world, approximately bigger than the entirety of Europe or Australia, competing with the entire South America in size. Aside from East Antarctica, we discussed there are several more regions: Antarctica Peninsula, South Pole, West Antarctica, and the Ross Sea. The continent is basically a frozen sandbox, and all its hidden, mysterious landscape is actually less explored than Mars's terrain. We only know for sure that without ice, it wouldn't just be flat and empty, but an entire world full of big mountains, huge canyons, and even fiery volcanoes. Some of these volcanoes are so huge that they peak above the layers of snow. In West Antarctica alone, there are at least 138 volcanoes, though only about 8 or 9 are active today. One of the craziest ones is Mount Erebus, the southernmost volcano and the tallest one on the continent, about 12,500 feet high. And deep beneath the ice sheet, this guy hosts incredible, beautiful subvolcanic caves. The temperatures there are warm enough for t-shirts. The Antarctic Peninsula, or Lesser Antarctica, looks like a bunch of mountainous islands deeply underground. It has newer volcanic rocks that are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is like a giant circle of volcanoes and earthquake zones around the Pacific Ocean. The Greater Antarctica is a huge part, almost as big as Australia. It consists of East Antarctica and the South Pole. Beneath the ice, it's a place of rocks that have been around for a very, very long time, including the special zone we mentioned. You probably know that Antarctica is nearly devoid of humans. No wonder, with a mean temperature of about -46 degrees Fahrenheit. But even though this place is horrifyingly cold and deserted, life still clings on. You guessed it, in the underworld. In 2017, scientists found DNA traces of algae, moss, and even possibly unknown small animals in the deep caves. That means that even in such crazy conditions, there are still unique ecosystems thriving in little isolated warm pockets beneath the snow. There was another incredible find beneath Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, a lively ecosystem vibing within an underground river. Scientists have long suspected that Antarctica's underworld should have some freshwater lakes and rivers. One day, a satellite spotted a groove there. They decided to explore it and used a hot water drill to melt their way through the ice. As they reached the underworld, they dropped a camera into one of those hidden fresh rivers. And at first, they thought they'd find just some rocks or something. But instead, they stumbled upon hundreds of amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures. Little ones instantly swarmed around the lens. Shrimps blocked the camera and scientists couldn't check out what they wanted to. Pretty funny, but at least that means that there really is an important ecosystem deep within Antarctica. Now, they're gonna explore it. And all this is just the beginning of the mysterious underworld. Antarctica's snow also hides the deepest canyon on Earth under the Denman Glacier. Well, Mariana Trench is still the deepest point on Earth, but it's a part of the oceanic crust, geologically speaking. Also, in 1958, explorers found a huge mountain range under the ice, as big and tall as the famous Alps Mountains. The range stretched for about 745 miles with peaks as high as 1.7 miles. And all this magnificence is buried under tons of ice. Who knows what else we might find there? Antarctica holds about 60% of our entire planet's fresh water, which means it would be pretty bad if it melted. For example, there's this Doomsday Glacier, officially known as Thwaites Glacier. It's a huge ice formation, about the size of Florida, and it's melting right now. Every year, the sea levels rise by 4% because of it. If this guy melts away completely, the sea levels all around the world will increase by 2 feet, which might not sound like a lot, but it would be catastrophic for coastal areas. Luckily, researchers have found that even if its ice shelf were to collapse in the next 50 years, the glacier itself wouldn't retreat as quickly as they feared. It's still losing ice rapidly, but it would be quite a slow process. The snowpack over your head splits in two right in front of your eyes and starts tumbling down in the frozen slope to its resting place far, far below. Anything in its way is crushed under the immense mass of snow and debris. You're witnessing an avalanche, one of the most dangerous natural disasters. But what if I tell you about another kind of avalanche, no less blood-chilling than the mountain one? And the most bizarre thing about it is that it occurs underwater. Underwater avalanches are powerful and disastrous natural phenomena, often much more dangerous than land ones. They have the potential to wreak havoc on the entire planet, leading to catastrophic consequences. The most alarming thing? They occur all the time under the surface of the ocean, impossible to see, predict, and extremely difficult to measure. Such avalanches can get 100 times larger than land ones, and they pose a great risk to the world's communications, capable of leaving the entire planet without the internet. But we'll talk about it a bit later. First, let's go 60,000 years back into the past. We're near the northwest coast of Africa, ready to witness the colossal scale and devastating impact of a ginormous underwater avalanche. It started as a quite small underwater landslide in the Agadir Canyon. At first, it was just 0.35 cubic miles of material, but in no time, This mass increased more than 100 times in size while traveling across the Atlantic Ocean floor. As the avalanche sped up and grew, it picked up gravel, sand, rocks, and mud. It carved a devastating path through one of the world's largest submarine canyons, wiping out all forms of animal and plant life on its way. The disastrous flow was so powerful that it literally eroded a 250-mile stretch of the canyon, cutting hundreds of feet into its sides and damaging a total area of 1,740 square miles. That's the area of more than 3.5 New York cities. As for the force of the flow, it was so immense that it propelled massive boulders up the canyon walls to heights of up to 430 feet. Before scientists discovered the evidence of this catastrophic event, they had seriously underestimated the scale of destruction caused by submarine avalanches. By the way, these devastating catastrophes can start not only far away in the ocean, but also at estuaries. Let's go back to 14 January 2020 and see for ourselves. A turbidity current, a rapid, downhill flow of water containing a lot of sediment, rushed more than 680 miles from the Congo River estuary in the deep sea. This current appeared due to two factors: terrible flooding along the Congo River in late December 2019 and unusually large spring tides. This resulted in an avalanche of sand and mud. Its volume was equivalent to 1/3 of all the sediment produced annually by all the rivers in the world. This sediment avalanche accelerated, increasing in speed from 17 feet per second in the upper part of the Congo Canyon to 26 feet per second when it reached the end of the channel, almost 700 miles away from the coastline. This route made it the longest avalanche of sediment ever measured on our planet. 2 days later, the flow reached the deep ocean. The avalanche broke 2 seabed telecommunication cables, cutting internet data speeds all the way across West, Central, and South Africa. Now, before this disaster, scientists considered that measuring powerful deep-sea avalanches was impractical. But the sediment flow in the Congo Canyon could be monitored directly, finally allowing researchers to assess how major river floods connected to the deep sea. They also concluded that how often underwater avalanches occurred depended on where the observer was. Seafloor canyons that are close to river mouths can experience several tiny avalanches per year. Other systems, far from river discharges like the Agadir Canyon, can only have one monster of an avalanche every 10,000 years or so. You're likely wondering, what can trigger an avalanche under the surface of the ocean? Well, earthquakes, typhoons, high tides, river floods, and even volcanic eruptions. And due to our changing climate, such events become more and more frequent and intense. At the same time, these triggers don't mean that an avalanche is bound to happen, nor do they relate to the scale of the event. See for yourself. In 1755, a powerful earthquake hit the coast of Portugal, wiping out large parts of Lisbon. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives during that disaster, but it only triggered a tiny underwater avalanche. And in 1929, a large earthquake off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, triggered the largest underwater avalanche ever recorded. The flow traveled at a speed of 42 miles per hour, carrying boulders, sand, and mud. It snapped 11 seabed cables on its journey downhill. The avalanche was so powerful, it produced a tsunami that claimed the lives of 28 people along the coastline. Now, submarine avalanches are totally invisible because they happen deep under the ocean surface, which makes them extremely hard to study. But we must find a way because these flows are super important. They transport sediments, nutrients, and even pollutants across the ocean floor. So, a research team from Liverpool decided to unravel this mystery. Over the last 40 years, they've collected more than 300 samples from the ocean floor. Combined with seismic and bathymetric data, which is a fancy word for ocean mapping, they managed to reconstruct a massive submarine avalanche. It was the first time an underwater avalanche of this size was mapped out. An even cooler thing, the event itself started off pretty modestly. but it quickly evolved into a colossal avalanche that grew to more than 650 feet tall. To put that into perspective, imagine a skyscraper-sized avalanche zooming from Liverpool to London, cutting a trench 100 feet deep and 9 miles wide. Then it spread out over an area bigger than the UK, covering it with several feet of sand and mud. That's like burying a whole country. These findings are actually a big deal because they show that even a small underwater landslide can turn into something massive and super destructive. But that's not the worst. Think about undersea internet cables, which are essential for global communication. There are more than 550 active seafloor cables around the world. Their combined length is a whopping 870,000 miles. That's enough to wrap around our planet 35 times. When a submarine avalanche breaks seafloor cables, the effects are usually super expensive and devastating. For example, in 2006, an earthquake in Taiwan triggered underwater avalanches that cut loads of seafloor cables connecting Southeast Asia with the rest of the world. The largest internet operator in China had a 90% loss of traffic to the USA at the peak of the event. As for Taiwan itself, it experienced between 74 to 100% loss in traffic to neighboring islands. So now you probably get why we need to learn more about this natural phenomenon. Luckily, researchers at Tulane University have found a way to study it in 3D. Previous studies only looked at submarine avalanches in 2D, which didn't give the full picture of how they actually behaved. The new research focused on how underwater flows interacted with mini basins, natural features on the ocean floor that look like shallow bowls. Despite being called mini, these bowls can be huge, up to 4 square miles. When turbidity currents flow into these mini basins, they don't just stop. No, they hit the far side and curl back around like water eddies in a stream. These swirling flows move the sediment around before it settles on the ocean floor. The size of the mini basin and the speed of the flow can change how the current behaves. If the basin is big and the current is slow, it starts to fill up with sediment. But if you crank up the flow speed or shrink the basin, the current starts to overflow, spilling over the basin. To study all this, the researchers created a mini version of a mini basin in a pool and used different speeds of flow to simulate turbidity currents. They even made their own sediment mixtures to see how different sizes of particles would behave. In the end, they managed to mimic real-life ocean conditions, but on a smaller, manageable scale. Pretty cool, huh?
Hey now, get ready to dive into the Sea of Mysteries, also known as the Black Sea. It is the largest inland body of water in the world, bigger than the entire state of California. It has dozens of lost ships and some secret underwater tunnels. And some people believe it's an ancient quarry that was mined out in 6 stages. The Black Sea has distinct vertical layers that don't mix, with higher and lower salinity. The salty water comes from the Mediterranean, and fresh water comes from rivers. 10 of the largest rivers in Europe flow into the Black Sea. It receives more fresh water from the rivers and rainfall than it loses from evaporation. The extra water flows through the Bosphorus into the Marmara Sea. There are 2 flows going through the straits. The upper flow leaves the Black Sea and takes surface water out of it. The bottom flow carries salt water from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea. That's why the upper layers of the Black Sea are less dense than its saltier lower layers. The oxygen that comes from the atmosphere and photosynthesis stays in the surface layers. Everything deeper than about 300 feet in the middle and up to 500 feet near the edge is not fit for life. Only certain bacteria can survive in these conditions. Although there's no air deep down in the Black Sea, the upper layer is home to around 750 species of phytoplankton. Eggs and larvae of fish and invertebrates chill in coastal regions. There are also 180 fish species in the Black Sea, and some of them are valuable, such as horse mackerel, spiny dogfish, and sprat. The water level in the Black Sea is always the same because there are no high or low tides. So the sea is always calm, quiet, and serene on the surface. But it has one surprise feature: an underwater river. It's a current of salty water flowing through the Bosphorus Strait and along the seabed. This amazing discovery was made by scientists from the University of Leeds and was announced in 2010. It's the first undersea river of its kind ever found. The river forms because salty water from the Mediterranean Sea spills through the Bosphorus Strait into the Black Sea, where the water is much less salty. The no-air zone of the sea is an ideal conservation chamber for what's hiding on its bottom. The Black Sea is like a treasure trove for shipwrecks, and we discovered it by accident. Some maritime archaeologists were studying sea levels to see how quickly the water levels rose after the last ice age, and they ran across over 40 previously unknown shipwrecks as a complete bonus. Researchers used 2 remotely operated vehicles to explore the seafloor and the wrecks. Thanks to it, we have a video and detailed 3D images of the ships that were stitched together from thousands of high-resolution photos. According to the New York Times, some of the standout discoveries among the 44 ships found include a medieval training vessel from the 13th or 14th century. Expedition members nicknamed another ship from the Ottoman Empire the Flower of the Black Sea for its beautiful petal carvings. The team also noticed unusual details on other ships, like coiled ropes, chisel marks, rudders, and other carvings. So far, they haven't announced any plans to excavate the shipwrecks, but the ships might be filled with historical treasures like books, parchments, and documents. It's worth a try to rescue them. The most extraordinary discovery in the Black Sea is what archaeologists believe to be the world's oldest intact shipwreck. It has been lying undisturbed for over 2,400 years. This ancient Greek vessel, 75 feet long, was found with its mast, rudders, and rowing benches all still in place, over a mile beneath the surface. Researchers believe the ship was a trading vessel, like those depicted on ancient Greek pottery, such as the Siren vase in the British Museum. This vase, or vase, dating from the same period, shows a vessel carrying Odysseus past the Sirens. The team took a small piece for carbon dating, and the results confirmed it as the oldest intact shipwreck known to humankind. The fact that it's so elaborate and well-preserved deserves a standing ovation for shipbuilders of the ancient world. Without microbes, worms, or other creatures to eat away the wrecks, it's no wonder the ships are in almost perfect condition. If the Titanic had sunk in these waters, we would have found it in a much better state now, not being eaten by nasty underwater microorganisms. Now, there's an interesting theory called the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis, which suggests a huge flood happened around 7,500 years ago. 2 geologists in the 1990s suggested that at the end of the last ice age, when the Earth's climate was heating up, ice sheets were melting and sea levels were rising. The Black Sea was a much smaller freshwater lake. It was separated from the Mediterranean Sea by a natural dam at the Bosphorus Strait. As global sea levels rose, the Mediterranean overflowed into the Black Sea basin. They suggest the sea level rose by 6 inches every day, flooded coastal settlements, and changed the environment for good. Samples from the Black Sea floor show a sudden shift from freshwater to marine species around that time, which means there was a rapid influx of salt water. Underwater surveys have also found what look like the old shorelines and human-made structures. So, people were living in areas now submerged by the Black Sea. Plus, the timing of this flood matches up with known patterns of human migration into Europe, Asia, and Africa. They also say this flood could be the terrible flood from the story of Noah's Ark. Critics of the deluge theory say the evidence isn't as straightforward as it seems. Some think the transition from freshwater to saltwater in the Black Sea was more gradual than one sudden flood. They're also debating if people left the settlements before they went underwater or as a result. An old chronicle that's been around for about a century says there were 2 underground tunnels starting in what is now Romania and Bulgaria and stretching all the way under the Black Sea to Turkey. Back in the day, peasants used these tunnels to move their flocks of sheep to the Ottoman Empire and countries on the Asia Minor Peninsula. Who built these tunnels and why they run under the sea is a complete mystery. At some point, the entrances to these tunnels were sealed off for national security and were under tight guard. The security forces knew all about these massive tunnels and kept them off limits. In the 1980s, a group of people working on the Danube-Black Sea Canal accidentally found another entrance to these mysterious tunnels. This one was in a cemetery in a town of Romania. Canal workers used it to regularly cross over into Bulgaria. One more cool thing about these two tunnels is that some people think they were built thousands of years ago. If you ever try to dig a tunnel under the sea, you'll know how tricky it is even now with all the tech we have. So if the tunnels are really that old, whoever built them was super advanced for their time. Now, there's an urban legend that says that the Black Sea has its own version of the Bermuda Triangle. Fishers describe some wild whirlpool that appears out of nowhere and drags entire flocks of birds, ships, and even small islands under the sea. And once, things got even wilder with a ship that vanished under weird conditions in 1944. It was during daylight, and some black fog with green flashing sparkles suddenly surrounded the vessel. No one has ever seen it since, and no one knows for sure if the story is true. But it sure adds a spooky touch to the mysteries of the Black Sea. Now, when you think of Norway, things that come to mind are the sun that never sets in the summer, unbelievable nature, the fact that it's one of the happiest countries in the world, even white bears that freely roam in the wild. I'm guessing they're happy too. Already planning your trip to this dream country? Well, don't rush. You'll have to review your budget. Fuel there is 10 to 15% more expensive than in other Western European countries. A meal at a cafe for one person will cost at least $30. Plus, consider yourself lucky if you manage to find a hotel at $100 a night. If you Google the most expensive country in the world, you'll see this list. Switzerland, which is memishly expensive. The United States, duh, been there, know that. Luxembourg is not a surprise either. And then, all of a sudden, you see Norway. Just so you know, a family of 4 would need over $4,000 a month just to exist in Norway. And it doesn't even include rent. Specialists say that Norway is around 7% more expensive than in the US. Norway is a bit weird though. Usually the richest countries have national currencies that are stronger than the US dollar. Take Swiss francs, for example, or the Kuwaiti dinar, which is literally the boss when it comes to currencies. Like one Kuwaiti dinar can snag you $3.25 US. Now, here's where the mismatch comes. The Norwegian krone is dubbed the weakest currency in the West. Well, how come? In the wild world of global currencies, the Norwegian krone used to be a tough player known for smart money moves. But surprisingly, it is now the weakest currency in the West, taking a big hit in the last decade. It has fallen hard against the US dollar and euro, causing concern for central banks and money folks worldwide. The oil price roller coaster is a major factor in the krone's struggle, as Norway relies heavily on oil exports. But even with oil prices relatively high, it remains historically weak against major currencies. The weak Norwegian krone is affecting everyday folks too, with prices rising on almost everything due to heavy imports. Inflation is growing, leading to interest rate hikes by the Norges Bank. High interest rates are hurting the housing market and making life more expensive for Norwegian citizens. So one of the supposed reasons for why Norway is so expensive might be weak national currency. What else is particular about Norway? Well, climate for sure. It may be hard to imagine a freezingly cold country plunging into riches. It's an imagery we usually see on social media with geotags Dubai, Saudi Arabia, or even Kuwait. And it makes sense to think now that all the riches are somewhere southward, as these places have strong oil-based economies and super strong currencies. But in reality, better economies in the south are a current trend. Ever wonder why cold countries seem to be raking in the cash while the hot nations are just hanging out? Turns out, those living in chilly climates had to hustle just to survive winter. Think building shelter, stockpiling food, and keeping that fire burning. Meanwhile, those basking in the sunshine had it a little easier with hunting and foraging year-round. This theory holds true even in the land down under. Sydney and Melbourne, the top dogs in Australia's wealth game, also happen to be some of the coldest cities, while Darwin, the warmest city, is lagging behind. Some might argue that this theory doesn't hold up when we look at ancient civilizations or modern hotspots like tropical Singapore. But hey, times change, and so does wealth generation. Back in the day, it was all about farming, but now it's more about industry and innovation. So, Norway may seem to have been bound to get rich historically and geographically. Still, it's not exactly so. Norway used to struggle a lot. Back in the day, it faced some tough times with harsh winters and tricky geography. They even had famines that pushed families to seek a better life in the US. So, how did Norway go from rags to riches? Yep, oil and gas played a big role. The country is small, but it has around 0.31% of all oil reserves in the world. But in Norway, there's more to the story than just black gold. For example, the top oil reserve is not some Arabic country, but Venezuela, which claims up to 20% of the world's liquid gold. Still, Venezuela's economy is far from stable, so it's not all about oil. Although bested in forest size by other European nations, Norway was an unrivaled powerhouse in lumber during the Age of Sail. Thanks to its strategic fjord path, timber from its inland forests could quickly reach fjordside mills and global markets. As railroads unlocked larger forest potential in other countries post the 19th century, Norway was Europe's timber king, bolstered by a world-class merchant fleet by the 20th century. The Norwegian timber wealth, coupled with early cooperative societal norms, spurred growth across several sectors, from agriculture to fishing and banking. Despite being labeled poor in the 19th century, Norway's GDP per capita outshone Eastern and Southern European nations. The nation's ascendancy continues beyond the discovery of its oil reserves. Norway is unique, with a small population but sprawling land. Despite its vastness, the Nordics are scattered and considered one of the most spacious countries globally. Much of the North's territory stretches beyond the Arctic Circle, offering harsh landscapes with thin topsoil covering the bedrock. The tough terrain in Norway, full of mountains and with a short growing season, limits arable land to only 2.2%, similar to Yemen. The scattered arable land in small valleys makes extensive farming impractical, a far cry from the efficient farming in the U.S. With a huge chunk of land and coastlines, but a small population, Norway makes some serious cash from its reserves. Plus, nature has been pretty kind to Norway, with rich fishing grounds, hydropower from rivers, and power from cold waters. And only then comes the little thing called oil. The late 50s saw a big discovery that changed everything for Norway's economy. Fast forward to today, and petroleum activities have been a major game changer for Norway, feeding its economic growth and funding its welfare state. But Norway didn't just sit back and watch the money flow in. They made smart moves, like creating a sovereign wealth fund to manage their oil wealth for the long haul. The fund sees some big bucks, currently standing at 1.7 billion Norwegian kroner, or over 160 million US dollars. Norway uses the interest from this fund to boost its annual budget, ensuring top-notch healthcare, education, and welfare for its citizens. And here's the kicker: Norway's not resting on its laurels. They're investing in sustainable technologies, like offshore wind power, to secure a bright future beyond oil and gas. Now, Norway may be expensive, but it can't compete with the world's costliest place to live, Monaco. It's almost 4 times more expensive than the global average. So, if you're looking to rub elbows with the rich and famous, look no further than Monaco. With property prices soaring to an average of over $50,000 per square meter in 2022, it's no wonder why this tiny country is a magnet for the la-di-da. However, there's a place that's particularly expensive for tourists, and I'm not talking about tourist traps. Neither Oslo nor Monaco can beat the prices in, well, take a second to make your guess. Ready? Welcome to Ashgabat, Turkmenistan's capital. A gallon of milk costs a whopping $15 US, while a standard internet subscription plan will set you back $168 US a month. Calm down, you're not poor, it's just an economic glitch. The reason for these prices is simple. The Turkmen national currency exchange rate in relation to dollars is fixed and never changes. $1 equals 3.5 manats, and it's been so since 2015. Local prices in the local currency grew to inflation, making it not proportionate to prices in dollars. The exchange rate never changes. So if you live there, such prices don't seem to be extraordinary. But if you come with dollars, you're in for a pricey trip.
Nights can last 24 hours here. Streets have no names, and some say there are more polar bears than humans. Cats are also banned, and if you manage to get here, you'll be expected to take off your shoes when entering a restaurant or a museum. Svalbard is a group of Norwegian islands that lies in the chilling depths of the Arctic, and it's one of the closest places to the North Pole people can live in. Visiting needs a lot of planning in advance. You'll need a visa, clothes for extremely cold weather, and an experienced local expert to guide through the wilderness. Why no cats? Because they're considered an invasive species that can damage delicate wildlife, especially the birds, which have no idea how to fend for themselves against furry felines. There are no names for streets, only numbers. This was the custom way back when the region was filled with miners, and they wanted to keep things simple. You might see slippers being offered when you enter an establishment for people who want to take off their shoes. This is also based on an old practice when locals took off their dirty outdoor shoes to avoid making a mess inside. These islands are also home to the impenetrable global seed vault. The construction needs to be kept in pristine conditions, since it's home to around 1 million plant seed samples in case something bad ever happens to our planet and we need to rebuild our natural habitat. The plant vault was constructed deep within a mountain and over 400 feet above sea level. It's also built to withstand very strong earthquakes. There are no visitors allowed inside, but some guided tours take people very close to its gates. Once you reach this island in the South Pacific, you can claim a piece of land and start building your dream home. It's called Pitcairn, and last they checked, it hosted less than 50 permanent residents. The weather stays tropical all year round, and the landscape is breathtaking, but it's a pain getting there. Say you're departing from Los Angeles. You'll first need to take a flight to Tahiti. Then, board another flight to the island of Managriva, which only departs once a week. Here you'll reach the closest airport to Pitcairn, which is still 330 miles away from the shore. The rest of the adventure needs to be completed by boat, but it will take you more than 30 hours. That's only if you're lucky enough to embark in the first place, since the boat journeys to the island with supplies a mere once every 3 months. There's not a lot of things to do for such long travel times. Only 4 families live on the island, and there's a single cafe and 1 art gallery. You might be able to book a stay in a former prison, though. Locals first figured out they needed a prison in 2004, but it soon became unused. So now it also doubles as a hostel. Underneath the Bank of England, there's its mysterious gold vault, a fortress that's notoriously hard to explore, for good reason. It's said to house around 400,000 gold bars, valued at around $250 billion. There are many layers of defense on this place. Complex tech surveillance, heavy doors weighing over 3 tons, guards that are on alert 24/7, and the very few people authorized to reach past the gates use things like voice recognition to unlock. The official story back in the 1800s was that the bank had such a good defense that it could never be robbed. There is a rumor, though, that bank officials started getting anonymous letters claiming someone managed to pierce its walls. They shrugged it off until they met face to face with the culprit, a sneaky sewage worker. He slid out from under the floor of the vault, claiming he'd made his way in after discovering an old drain during repairs. An honest man, the sewage worker never touched a dime. To his surprise, he wasn't punished for breaking in. Legend has it he was rewarded with the equivalent of around $100,000 for discovering the security breach. This perky building is called the Tridongar Lighthouse, and it can be found in Chile, Iceland. This compact construction is perched on the highest of 3 rocky spots in a tiny cluster. Waves constantly crash against the cliff, which means it's not reachable by boat. The only way to get there these days is via helicopter. It's not open for tourists, but there are many nearby helicopter-guided tours that explore its surroundings. Constructing this sturdy building back in 1939 was tremendously complicated. The builders had to manually lay the foundation and climb nearby cliffs to hit the pinnacle. The tough weather with its freezing rain and rough winds made it even more difficult. Those slippery rocks also posed a risk. A slip, and builders would end directly in the chilly North Atlantic. The construction crew also had to use their mountaineering skills. Finishing the lighthouse meant they had to improvise with a human pyramid. One person on its knees, another on top, and a third on top of them. Point Nemo translates to the point with no man. It's the location in the ocean that's furthest away from any piece of land, over 1,600 miles away. It's a sad zone when it comes to wildlife too. This area in the South Pacific Ocean is vast, about 34 times the size of France. But marine life can't thrive here because of the lazy ocean currents. They can't bring enough nutrients for bigger sea creatures to survive. Scientists were only able to see some bacteria and small crabs in those volcanic vents at the seafloor. Point Nemo was first pinpointed in 1992, but it hasn't been explored much since. Sailors aren't even the closest people to Point Nemo. They're the astronauts that cruise above it in the International Space Station. Because it's mostly barren, astronauts have often used it in their exploration projects. When spacecrafts are ready to retire, this is where they're laid to rest. It's the best place to avoid land damage by having devices plunge into the Pacific. Over the years, Point Nemo's become a resting place for all sorts of space machines, over 250 of them. In 1997, Point Nemo also became the source of an unusual sound heard by marine scientists called the bloop. While people were initially excited to link the weird noise with some undiscovered and dangerous ocean creature, it was soon learned that the sound was made by an ice quake underwater. Can people go through Point Nemo? Not anytime soon. The exact location of this spot was calculated using special software to solve the challenge of the longest swim. The goal was to show the spot in the global ocean where, if someone falls off a ship, they'd be the farthest from any land in every direction. It's possible that no one has passed through these exact coordinates at all. No commercial or touristic ships are known to pass through. The Hranice Abyss is located in the Czech Republic, and it's the deepest flooded pit cave in the world, measuring over 1,700 feet. Scientists have yet to identify how far it reaches into the ground. It also didn't form as most pits do, from the surface of the Earth making way down. This one made its way up due to lukewarm mineral water filled with carbon dioxide. This fizzy concoction emerged from deep within the ground and chiseled away at the limestone. At some point in its history, the ceiling gave in, unveiling this huge hole to the world. It's not just the depth that makes it difficult to explore. It's the liquid itself. It can cause problems since it has a high carbon dioxide content, enough to tickle a diver's exposed parts. This water's unique blend even influences the type of gear one can wear. Opt for open-circuit scuba, and the exhaled bubbles set off a chemical reaction. The result means less visibility in a place with low light conditions.
Planning your next trip? You need to find accommodation, book airline tickets, and what else? Make sure you're safe on the road, of course. Some tourists actively seek dangerous destinations, though. The Yungas region in western Bolivia is the perfect place to find adventure. It's home to one of the most perilous tourist destinations on the planet, Carretera de la Muerte, the Death Road. The Yungas Road is around 43 miles long. It connects the capital city of La Paz to a town in the Amazon basin of Bolivia. The local bus covers the distance in some 3 to 4 hours. But why so long? The road from San Francisco to San Jose is roughly the same length. You can cover this distance in under an hour by car. So, what's stopping drivers from doing the same on the Yungas? It's more than one thing. If you want to drive to the Bolivian capital, you'll set off at an elevation of 5,000 feet. But when you reach your destination, you'll be at a staggering 12,000 feet above sea level. After all, La Paz is the highest capital city in the world. If these figures are making you dizzy, you might want to sit down before you hear the next number. The highest peak on the whole road, La Cumbre, sits at more than 15,000 feet. That's the height people go skydiving from. Such high mountains aren't the best place to build a road. But the engineers didn't place the road here for no reason. It's an important trade route. Trucks transport everything from coffee to tropical fruit along the Yungas Road. It's nearly a century old, constructed in the 1930s. In most places, the road is unpaved. Its main surface is a mix of dirt and gravel. The workers carved it out of an almost vertical mountainside. Look down and you'll feel vertigo. There's a drop of some 2,000 feet. It's impossible not to think about this while driving. But there are at least 2 lanes, right? Not quite. Because of the terrain, there's only 1 lane, if you can call it that. The road is rarely wider than 10 feet. By comparison, a Tesla Model S is 6.5 feet wide, and that's without the mirrors sticking out on each side. That would be one tight squeeze. But believe it or not, even large trucks go up and down this path. For the most part, there are no guardrails to prevent the vehicles from dropping into the abyss. And then there's the weather. In summer, the dust from the vehicles decreases visibility, and fog often appears, making the drivers feel as if they were driving blindfolded. In winter, it's no better. Heavy rains make the road muddy and slippery. Torrents can wash away whole sections of the roadway. Landslides occur frequently. A boulder can fall on an unsuspecting driver at any moment. Sounds more like an obstacle course than a roadway. The only good side is that you shower on the go. There are natural waterfalls along the way that travelers use to wash themselves. Until 2006, this mountain highway was the only way to reach the capital from the Yungas region. That's why buses and trucks of all sizes had to squeeze along cliff edges. Sadly, some of them never made it to their destination. On average, 26 vehicles plummet over the edge each year. The total cost in human life? 200 to 300 people lose their lives each year on the Yungas Road. That's really sad. The Bolivian authorities were determined to change something. It took them a full 20 years, but they finally constructed an alternative road. It runs along a nearby mountain range. The new bypass has 2 paved lanes. It's secured with guardrails, and it even has drainage. This helped relieve pressure from the old and dangerous route. Today, there is significantly less traffic than in the 90s. At that time, the Inter-American Development Bank proclaimed the route as the most dangerous road in the world. In come the tourists. Yes, after the locals could finally travel safely across the region, travelers from all over the world took on the challenging road. Tens of thousands of them flocked to the road in search of adrenaline, mostly traveling by bike. But the path is still dangerous. Since 1998, at least 25 cyclists have lost their lives here. The road is so narrow that you don't have enough space to brake. The side of the road is lined with memorials to people who perished riding their bicycles here. But the Bolivian highway isn't the only dangerous destination tourists like to visit. In Africa, there is a natural pool at the very edge of Victoria Falls. It becomes accessible only in the dry season. That's when the water level of the mighty Zambezi River drops enough to reveal the pool. People come here to take amazing photos, but they're just inches away from danger. A rock lip forms the edge of the pool. If a careless swimmer goes beyond it, there is a huge drop, well over 300 feet. The danger is very real. Tourists often forget they're in the middle of a powerful river. More than 1 million gallons of water cascade down Victoria Falls every minute. A complete lack of water can be dangerous as well. That is the case in one region of California, Death Valley. This is the hottest place on Earth. Temperatures here reach 130 degrees Fahrenheit. But tourists are attracted to these extreme conditions. In 2022 alone, more than 1 million people visited the area. Trekking in this desert landscape is highly dangerous. Even driving can cost people their lives. If you have a car accident here, the heat will soon get to you. Dehydration and heat stroke are real dangers. And if that wasn't enough, there are rattlesnakes. 7 species of snakes live in the Mojave Desert. Back in Europe, Ireland is a popular travel destination. In 2019, 19 million people visited the Emerald Isle. That's close to 4 times the population of the Republic of Ireland. Tourists first explore Dublin, but then they want to see the countryside. And the biggest attraction there is as dangerous as it is beautiful: the Cliffs of Moher. They stand on the island's rugged west side. Visitors who try to get close to their edge for a better photo are risking their lives. The drop is 700 feet. One wrong step, and they can fall down from a height greater than the height of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Sadly, this has already happened several times in the past. In Florida, there is a place that looks like a dream to any American surfer: New Smyrna Beach. But there is a danger lurking beneath the waves: sharks. New Smyrna is a hotspot for them. A surfer paddling on his board looks like a seal to the shark below, and seals are their main prey. Since 2010, there have been 32 reported shark attacks in the area. That's why people call this section of the coastline the most dangerous beach in America. Not your ideal summer destination, definitely. Maybe it's better to go to Hawaii. Or not. This atoll hides dangers of its own. The Hawaiian Islands were formed by volcanic activity. These volcanoes attract tourists from all over the world. But slow-flowing lava isn't what's going to get you. It's poisonous gases. Can you guess what VOG is? No, I'm not speaking about the fashion magazine. This is volcanic smog, a mixture of ash and sulfur dioxide. That's the toxic gas you smell when you light a match. And when the lava flow hits the salt water in the ocean, you get laze, or lava haze. These plumes can travel up to 15 miles downwind, and they're not pleasant to inhale. Your eyes become dry, and your throat starts to itch, and those are the less severe symptoms. In a span of just 20 years, 5 tourists passed away due to exposure to volcanic gases.
Let's test to see how many spiral-shaped objects you can find around you right now. I'll bet there's more than you think. A spiral may be hidden in the flower petals of your houseplants. One might be staring at you from that seashell you brought home from your last trip to the beach. If none of these objects sound familiar, you might want to head over to the mirror and turn to the side a bit. In case you haven't noticed yet, even our own ears are shaped like a spiral. Why does Mother Nature seem to have such a preference for this shape? Many theories wish to explain this weird behavior. One of them is based on the Fibonacci sequence. This Italian mathematician didn't really care much for spirals initially. He was studying rabbits when he came up with this theory. Fibonacci came up with the sequence as a solution to a problem involving the growth of a population of rabbits. Let's recreate his experiment. If you put a pair of rabbits in an enclosed space, how many pairs of rabbits will you find there after a year? To solve this problem, Fibonacci proposed some conditions for his theoretical experiment: that all rabbits are born as a pair, one male, one female. Also, the rabbits can start reproducing after 1 month. More so, each pair of rabbits produces 1 pair of offspring each month. And lastly, none of the rabbits kicks the bucket at the end of the year. Now, using these assumptions, Fibonacci noticed the following sequence: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, and so on. The first two numbers in the sequence, 1, 1, represent the initial pair of rabbits. The next number, 2, represents the number of pairs of rabbits after the first month, one pair of the initial rabbits plus one pair of offspring. The fourth number, 3, represents the number of pairs after the second month, 2 pairs of the initial rabbits plus one pair of offspring, and so on. He soon noticed that his series is made out of numbers in which each number is the sum of the previous two numbers. A lot of other mathematicians have looked at this sequence over the years. They were soon surprised to discover that this system was found in many natural structures, such as the arrangement of leaves on a stem and the arrangements of seeds on a sunflower. If you don't understand why it is so, then grab a piece of paper and a pen. Together, let's try to draw the Fibonacci spiral. You'll have to start with a small circle at the center of your page and then draw larger circles around it without lifting the pen from the paper, using the numbers from the Fibonacci sequence. For example, the first circle is 0 units wide, the second circle is 1 unit wide, the third circle is 1 unit wide, and so on. As you keep adding more circles, they will fit together perfectly to form a spiral shape. The spiral gets bigger and bigger, but it always follows the same pattern based on the Fibonacci sequence. Another famous spiralist was a man named James Bell Pettigrew. He was a Scottish naturalist that became fascinated by the mystery of the spiral shape, which he noticed almost everywhere in nature. He studied it at all scales, from giant nebulae in space to tiny molecules. Despite his research, he couldn't figure out where the spiral came from. He was sure that it couldn't be just a physical thing, and he believed that organs in plants and animals are not only shaped like spirals, but they also work in a spiral way. At the center of lifetime work on this unique shape was the human heart. Pettigrew believed that the heart's spiral structure was the mystery of all mysteries. He also thought this shape was to blame for both its muscular contractions and how the blood seemed to travel within our mighty tickers. The reason why the spiral seems to be everywhere might be really simple: efficiency. Take a look at the basic sunflower, for example. It figured out a way to display its seeds so that it could expose them to the sun equally, without wasting any space and without being limited in their growth. Spiral stairs are another great example too. They just work better. You find it easier to climb them, and they should take less space than the usual ones. We also might be more inclined to notice this shape more than others. That's because a spiral shape, or its proportions, is more aesthetically pleasing to the human eye. It's the reason why interior designers, artists, or illustrators often use these principles in their work. The spiral symbol is also the oldest symbol found in every civilized continent. Some historians believe that the spiral in Asian art may represent the sun, as it has been found on roof tiles from the Tang dynasty near the ancient city of Chang'an. It is also often found at burial sites, and scientists believe it to represent the circle of life, how we pass on and somehow be reborn. This is probably because, in some ancient civilizations, people believed that the sun was born each day, extinguished itself each night, and was reborn the next day. You might have also stumbled upon the spiral as a symbol of hypnosis and dizziness. There's no real evidence that you can hypnotize someone by making them stare into a spiral for a certain time. But its effects on our abilities to focus and our optic nerves are significant. After you've stared at a spinning spiral for quite some time, you'll notice how objects either get smaller or bigger, depending on the direction of the spiral. It's easy to understand why some experience the sensation as hypnotizing. One of the most distinctive features of DNA is its spiral shape. It's also called a double helix. The double helix is formed when two strands of DNA twist around each other, like a ladder being twisted into a spiral shape. This spiral shape is important for many reasons. First, the spiral shape allows DNA to be compact and efficient. The double helix can pack a lot of genetic information into a small space, making it possible for cells to store vast amounts of genetic material in a small area. Second, the spiral shape allows DNA to be flexible and respond to changes in our environment. Because the double helix is made up of two strands that can move relative to each other, Our DNA can change its shape. Finally, the spiral shape of DNA allows it to interact with other molecules in the cell. Now, let's look at the big picture. The biggest of them all, that of the galaxies found in our universe. They're also shaped like a spiral due to their rotation and the presence of dark matter. As the galaxy spins, the stars and gas clouds within the galaxy move in a circular direction around its center. This movement creates a spiral shape as the stars and gas clouds are drawn toward the center of the whole system. Additionally, the presence of dark matter, which is a type of matter that does not interact with light, creates gravitational forces that help to shape the galaxy into a spiral. But you don't need to look that far to understand why spirals are important. Your handy corkscrew is shaped like a spiral too, because it makes it easier for you to open the wine bottle. That screw you drilled into the wall to hang a picture, also a spiral. It helps it with some added grip and stability. Got a notebook on your desk? Those pages might be held together by a spiraled wire. It makes it easier for you to browse the notebook without damaging the pages. Even your hair strands might have a curled shape. The curlier the hair, the drier it will be. It means it will get sebum from the scalp down on the strand slower, making it easier to maintain and clean. And before I spiral out of control, we're done here. What's up? Feeling anxious while landing? Hey, there's no need to worry, even if you land in such a particular place as Bhutan. Thing is, the terrain here is so extreme, it makes it super complicated to land. What's interesting about flying there is that there are really few pilots out there who are certified to land in Bhutan. Yeah, zigzagging toward the ground sounds like a real quest. Bhutan Paro International Airport is often named one of the world's most dangerous airports. In the whole world, there are only 2 airlines that fly to this airport. About 10 years ago, there were only 8 pilots who were permitted to fly there, but today the number is a bit bigger. But even so, there's something even tougher than Bhutan Paro International Airport. Seems like the Tenzing Hillary Airport in Lukla, Nepal has every possible danger. Short runway, super powerful winds, mountainous terrain, this place has it all. The runway here is only 1,729 feet long. Just for comparison, a regular runway in most airports is about 10,000 feet long or even more. Now, many airports have carpets in their gate areas. This nicety usually comes with a few other perks: low ceilings, comfortable seats, and a pleasant natural lighting. Needless to say that all those decorations cost airports a pretty penny, and carpets are not as easy to clean as hard floors are. But the key thing here is that they create a cozy feeling for passengers waiting for their flight, making them feel more relaxed. Well, sorry to break it to you, but it's not only meant to make you feel good. According to social research, calm passengers are about 7 to 10% more likely to go window shopping and actually buy something in the lounge area or duty-free zone. So, by investing in the passenger's comfort, airports are likely to increase their own income. Hey, as for spending money in the airport, there's an actual term for the first 60 minutes after you clear check-in: the golden hour. It's the time when passengers statistically spend more money in retail and duty-free areas of the airport. And having the most comfortable seats in those areas right in front of the shops is a clever trick to lure you in for shopping. Let's admit it, sitting in a comfy chair while looking at a flashing sign or shopping window can be tempting, and that's exactly what the airports want you to feel. You know how it sometimes goes? You get to the security checkpoint, and suddenly, it turns out you have something prohibited to take on board in your carry-on. Bye-bye, water bottle. Actually, you have an opportunity to mail them to any address inside the country. As for the unclaimed baggage, it's usually stored for about 60 days. Things taken away by security and not claimed can also get sold at special auctions and are delivered worldwide. Most airports have specific experts called profilers. These people practice what's called SPOT, or the screening passengers by observation technique. They carefully analyze facial expressions, gestures, and behavior to detect suspicious people. Their job is to notice the nonverbal signs of anxiety, such as people licking their lips, itching, or looking around a lot. If a profiler notices a person acting in a weird or off way, they can invite them for an inspection, where they will talk to the person to try to find out more about them. Profilers work in both the main terminals and passport control. The typical question they ask is, "What's the purpose of your visit?" They then check the person's reaction to this inquiry. No matter how reserved a passenger is, if they have something to hide, TSA officers will find out, thanks to the tiniest clues in people's behavior. So, you arrive at the airport already anticipating a couple of weeks away from work and all your daily troubles, park your car in the lot, and then find out that it's going to cost you a small fortune to leave your car there. Why so much? Well, airport parking lots are a business just like any other. The land on which they're built, the construction of the lot itself, the maintenance of the whole thing once it's already in operation, all that costs a handsome amount of money. And somebody has to pay for it, of course. In addition, parking right next to an airport is simply convenient, which adds to the final cost. If you're not ready to dip into your pocket for a piece of extra comfort, better take a cab or have a friend drop you off. Contrails, those white trails airplanes often leave behind them at high altitudes, are easily mistaken for engine exhaust, but most are nothing more than water vapor. During a flight, moisture in the air collects in the engines before being vented with the exhaust. The hot, wet air leaving the engines mixes with the cool, dry air found at high altitudes, resulting in long, thin lines of vapor. Humidity determines when contrails form and how long they remain visible. If it's already humid up there, then there's more water and the contrail is more prominent. And if it's cold, the droplets may turn into ice, staying behind for a much longer time. It might seem odd that the flight crew cares whether your window shades are up or down. The main reason is so the passenger's eyes can adjust to the outside light. Mostly, it's just a matter of getting people on and off quickly. But in an emergency, the last thing they want is people stopping to blink before they evacuate the plane. Another reason for all the shades to stay up when the plane is about to take off or land is for the ground crew to see if there's any trouble on board. For example, if there's a fire in the cabin, the ground crew outside will immediately notice it and act accordingly. If the shades are down, they might lose precious time to rescue the passengers and the flight crew. Looking out the window on the plane's wing, you see a small yellow double hook on it. It seems strange since it might mess with aerodynamics, but it's there for your safety. In case of an emergency landing, these hooks are used to secure ropes that help passengers exit the plane via the wings. If they're slippery, the rope will help you keep your footing and not fall over while going down. Woo-hoo! There are several extremely fast streams of air high up in the atmosphere of our planet. They move in strange ways, but have a more or less constant flow, allowing passenger aircraft to use them. When an airplane comes close to a jet stream, it may adjust to the direction of its current and fly a lot faster, propelled by the flow. Many airlines use this to their advantage to cut fuel costs and make air travel even faster. Clouds, especially thunderheads, can indicate that an area of turbulence is ahead. But sometimes, clear air turbulence occurs when a plane can drop a few feet and start shaking without any warning. It happens when two bodies of air collide at very high speeds and it's absolutely invisible, so the pilots can't tell when it would happen. The chances of getting into an area of clear air turbulence are higher at low altitudes over mountain ranges and near jet streams. Normally, after it's hit by lightning, an airplane is sent for inspection, but it can still safely complete its current flight. The fuselage conducts electricity well enough, and, like a lightning rod, the zap will most probably strike one of the tips of the airplane, either one of the wings or the nose. Then it seeks the ground, but doesn't find it, so it exits from the tail. It's easier for electricity to roll through the surface of the plane than to go inside, so people on board are safe from its effects. Still, lightning is powerful, and there can be some damage done to the plane on the outside. Anyway, if you're still nervous about flying, remember what pilots say. Any landing you can walk away from is a good landing. That didn't help, did it?
You've been wandering through the hot desert for several hours, trying to find a unique artifact. The sun seems to be shining more and more brightly with every minute. You have enough supplies of water and food, but not enough information about the object you're looking for. You check the compass, look at the horizon, and suddenly, something blinds you. It looks like a beam of light reflected from a mirror. Yeah, you found it! You run toward it and notice some red rocks. In the middle of the desert, far from civilization, there's a majestic metal monument. It's dug into the ground. The sun is warming its surface. You walk around it and take a few photos. Perhaps this is a technology from another planet. Let's try to study it. On November 18th, 2020, a group of biologists observed sheep in southeast Utah. They arrived at a small desert and watched the animals from a helicopter. It was not far from the area with red rocks. During the flight, one of the scientists noticed a strange shine coming from an unusual object. They landed and discovered a shiny metal monolith, rectangular in shape. It stood among the rocks, dug into the ground upright. The object was about 12 feet tall and 23 inches thick. There was a triangular prism made of stainless steel at its top. The whole monolith looked like some technological device with unknown functions. Biologists took a photo and posted it on the internet. These images became viral. People from all over the world wanted to see the artifact, but none of the scientists revealed its exact location. The fact is that the monolith was installed in a remote area, away from roads and cities. People could easily get lost trying to get there, or fail to find their way back. The monolith didn't release any electromagnetic or radio waves. It was made of ordinary metal alloys. There was actually nothing unusual about it. No one had dropped it from the sky. In general, it was just a beautiful piece of metal. But why was it standing here? Scientists couldn't answer. The biologists left this place. The mysterious monolith was left alone again in the middle of the desert. But not for long. Social media users managed to figure out the coordinates of this place. Hundreds of people came there, but didn't find the monolith. Only a triangular prism lay in the dust on the ground. Someone took the monolith. Who was it? No one knows. Then, such monoliths began to appear in other places around the world. One was found in the state of Atlanta, and another monolith appeared in Compton Beach, England. Someone put up a third monolith in Romania. They always appear unexpectedly and disappear just as suddenly. No one has ever seen people install them or take them away. But when the information about the monoliths spread worldwide, some people came out as their creators. It was a group of anonymous artists called the Most Famous. They said they were the creators of the monoliths in Utah and California, and that they had sold those sculptures for $45,000. Apparently, other monoliths were also created by these artists. Now we're going to another desert, somewhere in Southern California. There's only dried up land with a thin layer of sand, gray thickets of thorny bushes, and the scorching rays of the Californian sun. Somewhere in the distance, you notice a mirage. Many people who wandered through the desert without water said they had seen a fake lake in the distance. It was an illusion created by the sun, hot air, refraction of light, and their brain wanting to get a sip of water. So you also see a mirage now. But it's not a lake. It's a pool. You run closer and realize that this is not an illusion. In the middle of a hot desert, someone installed a pool with clean, cool water. You could be swimming there and probably even drinking this water if people hadn't destroyed this pool. One artist built it in the summer of 2014 and posted several photos on the internet, but without the coordinates. Many tourists tried to find it, but only a few succeeded. They took photos of the pool and left. But then, someone destroyed it completely. There has been no water there for many years, and the whole structure has gotten covered with sand and rust. Now let's visit a scary place. We're in the Czech Republic, in the small village of Lukova. We're walking through small, clean streets, passing by beautiful, cozy houses. and going to the edge of town, closer to the forest. Among the trees, you notice an old chapel. This building is abandoned. Old brick, faded paint on the walls, rust. It looks pretty creepy. You go inside and freeze in horror. You see people there. Each of them is covered with a white sheet. They're just standing there, unmoving. Some of them are sitting on benches, but you don't see their faces. Don't worry, they're not phantoms. These are plaster statues. In 1968, locals stopped visiting this chapel because of the collapsing roof. In 2014, one artist made this frightening installation and thus attracted many tourists. But still, the locals hope that soon the chapel will be restored. If you want to go to space, you don't have to become an astronaut. All you need to do is come to Bolivia, to the Uyuni Salt Flats. Imagine a clear night sky where you can see millions of stars and even other galaxies. Lower your head and you will see the same picture. The whole cosmos is reflected under your feet. You can't see the edge of this place and can barely make out the horizon line. You'll find yourself floating in the boundless blue sky if you come here during the day. This is the biggest mirror in the world. Its length is about 80 miles, almost 3 times the size of Manhattan. Unlike the other things in this video, this one was created by nature. The place is covered with a salt marsh. After the rain, a thin layer of water forms on this salty surface and reflects the sky. This is one of the most beautiful places on the planet, so make sure to go there. Now, we're in the green forests of Scotland. Walking through this place, you may not notice human silhouettes among the trees and bushes. These silhouettes are motionless. It's like they're waiting for something. All of them are covered with a special material that reflects the forest surrounding them. Famous Scottish sculptor Rob Mulholland made these statues from plexiglass, the kind of glass that functions as a mirror. 6 sculptures are united in one installation called Vestige. Rob wanted to show that people who lived in forests many years ago were united with nature. They were part of the green world, and their lives depended on the state of the forest and harvest. That's why they're so beautiful in the summer and creepy in the winter, when slush, snow, and bare trees get reflected in them. Here's a sculpture of a woman standing on a huge log as thick as a train. This is what the tiniest statue in the world looks like. This log she's standing on is just a strand of human hair. Imagine how small this sculpture is. It's impossible to see it without a microscope. South African artist Jan T. Hurwitz created it. After people took several pictures of this statue, it disappeared from the hair. Only Jan T.'s fingerprint remained on it. The artist doesn't reveal how he made such a piece of art, but some say that he used nano resin. This is not his only work. You can find his other projects on the internet. This giant sculpture is in India. It's called the Statue of Unity. It's twice as tall and several times more massive than the Statue of Liberty. This is the image of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, one of the founders of India. It was built in the fall of 2018 and is still the most giant statue in the world.
Having a roof over your head is one thing, but making it eccentric and one of a kind takes the indoor living experience to a whole new level. Let's take a look at the world's most unique houses. Let me present to you the floating seahorse. Now you've probably heard about houseboats, but add some luxury to it and you'll get a water-bound house as amazing as this one. This seaborne abode is part of a fleet of 130 similar homes being constructed off the coast of Dubai. The best part? The bedroom is on the lowest floor, which means you'll sleep beneath the waves. And yes, they come equipped with huge windows overlooking the coral reef. This isn't your normal backyard view, I'd say that. And that's not the only incredible feature of the place. The upper level boasts its own minibar and hot tub. However, if you got interested in acquiring one of these, you'll have to wait until 2025. But it sure will be worth the wait. Can you imagine throwing a party on board one of these things? Another water-bound eccentric abode is Jules Undersea Lodge. Located in Key Largo, Florida, the lodge is a converted underwater research laboratory. Here, you'll get a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to sleep under the sea. The experience in Jules Lodge begins with its unusual entrance. You'll need to scuba dive down there. Talk about an adventure holiday, huh? The hotel's window overlooks open waters and is always filled with tropical angelfish, parrotfish, barracuda, and snappers. At $900 a night, staying at Jules might feel like splashing out, but the price also includes the world's first underwater pizza delivery. The team at Jules carefully place a Papa John's pizza in a watertight container and hands it over so that a scuba diving delivery boy swims 30 feet down to deliver it to you. Yummy? Now, if you're in for a fun living experience, maybe you should model your next house on this place. The Slide House, located in Japan, was built with the motto, "Why walk when you can slide?" The Slide House is a modern family home featuring 3 floors of built-in slides. One side of this home, found in Tokyo, has standard stairs. Once you've made the climb to the top floor, you can cross to the other side of the house and ride the slide all the way back down to ground level. Look how happy the kids look sliding from their room to the kitchen floor. Oh, and the house also carries a built-in ball pit. If only more homes were built this interactive. Up next, we have something a little different. This eccentric sphere was designed as an eco-friendly capsule apartment, crafted out of iron wire, bamboo, sandbags, and plexiglass. It's called the Egg House, and its owner, architect Dai Hafei, created this quirky home for a total of $900. It was his way to explore innovative and cheap living in a big city. He lived in it for 2 months back in 2010 to prove its viability and only moved out when it got too chilly in the winter. But this portable home has most of the essentials, including solar power and a cozy bed. The grass seeds in the cladding ensure that rain will gradually transform the egg into a luscious green coating. It is tiny, but it's got its charm. What do you say? And speaking of eco-friendly homes, this one took the concepts to another level. German architect Rolf Disch built this cylindrical solar-powered home back in 1994 in Freiburg, Germany. The amazing thing about Disch's creation is that the house rotates, allowing it to harness maximum solar power by following the movement of the sun. I guess that's what gives the house the name heliotrope, since it literally chases the sun. Amazingly, the house is energy efficient. The home produces 5 times more energy than it uses. Not too shabby, huh? And what about a transformative home, one that can change into multiple shapes? This is the idea of architect Gary Chang. He devised an ingenious way to demonstrate how small living spaces, like the 360-foot square apartment he lived in since childhood, could be totally transformed. Utilizing his architectural know-how, he maximized his space by installing sliding screens, movable walls, and hidden storage spaces. His single-room apartment could now be transformed into a whopping 24 different rooms, simply by moving the walls. It sure is an intriguing blueprint for how we could use space in the future. This next house is solely for those who have nothing to hide. Why? Because it's made almost entirely out of glass. Located in the center of Tokyo, House NA is completely see-through. This means that everything you do will be visible to nosy neighbors and curious tourists alike. House NA is supposed to look a little bit like a modern treehouse. The white steel struts represent branches, while the flood of natural sunlight creates the illusion of living al fresco. Instead of rooms, the house has platforms, which you can reach by climbing small ladders. It's a stunning home, but if you value your privacy, you might want to install some curtains before considering moving in. Now, these next houses are for people who are looking to hide away. In northern Portugal, you'll find Casa de Penedo. The house was built between 4 enormous boulders. It's so well camouflaged that you might not even spot it at first glance. Which is exactly what the original owners wanted. They planned to use the house as a peaceful holiday retreat, a place to unwind and soak in the sights. However, news about the mysterious stone building spread fast, and soon tourists were rushing to take a look. Eventually, the owners moved out, and the house now functions as a small museum dedicated to the beauty of the surrounding landscape. And speaking of hidden homes, let's talk about the Mirror Cube. I'll say just one thing. If you blink, you'll probably miss this hideout. That's because the house was built to blend in with its surroundings. Located in Norway, this cube-shaped treehouse is wrapped around the trunk of a tree and covered in mirrors. It's quite beautiful if you manage to discern it from the leafy forest around it. Inside, you'll find enough space for 2 people to enjoy a simple woodland hideaway, with a double bed and a rooftop terrace accessible by a ladder. Be careful though. If you leave the Mirror Cube for a stroll, you might want to leave a light on so you can find it upon your return. Now, the forests in Brazil are lush and full of wildlife. But some of them are home to human life too. The Jungle House is one of the most luxurious mansions nestled deep within the Brazilian rainforest. Designed by Studio MK27, this house lies on the coast of Sao Paulo and is completely surrounded by nature. Its wooden design helps it to blend in with the jungle's dense vegetation. The entire luxury mansion is raised off the ground, which allows the home to rise above the canopy, affording the owner plenty of natural sunlight. Despite its wild-seeming location, the house is incredibly modern, featuring a huge swimming pool, a fire pit, and several bedrooms, all spread over 3 stories. Forget Tarzan, whoever owns this house is the king of the jungle. Ever thought about what an urban version of a treehouse would look like? Let's just say it has something to do with a crane. Crane 29 is an experimental crane house where guests can enjoy an unparalleled view of Bristol in England. The idea was conceptualized by Canopy and Stars, a luxury camping company that usually deals with treehouses and cabins hidden out in the wilderness. However, this industrial take on the treehouse concept was constructed in one of the city's many dockside cranes. Inside, Crane 29 is a haven for hipsters. The room contains a forest of houseplants, an indoor hammock, and a large collection of books. I'd be thrilled to book a weekend there. What would you say?
A wanderer walking through a desert feels the scorching sun like never before. You can see him from afar thanks to his shining clothes. His long hoodie is covered with foil. It reflects sunlight and protects him from heat. The ground is so hot that shoe soles can melt on it. That's why the wanderer's boots are covered with heat-resistant material. A cloudless sky, barren land, and heat. But the wanderer is not in the desert. He's walking on the ocean's bottom. He doesn't know why this happened, but all the oceans on Earth dried up. It happened almost instantly, and even the greatest minds in the world don't know why. The wanderer knows only one thing. When it happened, his family was on the other side of the ocean. For several months, he's been traveling across this lifeless land, and he won't stop until he finds his family. The landscape around is spectacular. People have finally found out the secrets of the ocean depths. The seabed consists of huge mountain ranges and volcanoes. They fell asleep forever after the water had disappeared. Also, there are huge trenches leading to the unexplored depths of the planet. People had to build bridges to get over these enormous cracks in the ground. But most of the ocean floor is flat plains, boundless, lifeless, merciless. The wanderer's walking across a huge canyon. Once, it was swarming with sea life. The man puts on a gas mask, but not because of a sandstorm. Many fish and other marine inhabitants used to live in such canyons. Now, all that's left is a terrible smell. The Wanderer passes by huge skeletons of whales. Among them, he notices dirty tents. People are hiding there from heat. The temperature in the area is much higher than in the Sahara Desert. One of the main functions of the ocean was to distribute heat all over the planet. The sun emits heat and radiation. The ocean absorbed this energy. Lots of currents were warm, and they carried this warmth around the world. The water got heated at the equator, then it evaporated and turned into clouds. When warm air rose, it pulled along colder air from below. This allowed the energy to be evenly distributed. In simple words, the ocean cooled hot places and brought warmth to cold ones. Now there's none of this. Every day the sun burns the equator and dries up the rest of the planet. The Wanderer doesn't come close to the tents. He is carrying the most valuable treasure in the world and doesn't want people to notice him. The inhabitants of Earth are just trying to survive, and many have forgotten about such a thing as morality. Fortunately, the Wanderer still remembers. The thoughts of the family help him remain a good person. Sometimes it complicates his life. Like now, for example. In the distance, he sees a young girl. She doesn't look well. There's no one around, and the Wanderer decides to help her. Out of his backpack, he pulls a thing worth more than all the gold on the planet, a bottle of water. The girl takes a few sips, but instead of thanking the Wanderer, she starts screaming. It's a trap. Her accomplices appear from different sides. Looters. They're gonna take everything. The Wanderer runs away. He hasn't eaten for several days, and his strength is leaving him. He won't be able to keep going much longer. The marauders are closing in on him. The Wanderer throws the bottle aside. His pursuers rush to the water like crazy. They forget about the man and fight one another for the bottle. The chances of the Wanderer's survival have greatly decreased. He could make this bottle last at least several days. Plus, he's also lost a lot of fluid because of running. In the beginning, there was no panic because of a lack of water. The ocean dried up, but its waters were salty anyway. People still had seas, lakes, and rivers. But the problem was that the ocean was feeding them. When the ocean water evaporated, it formed clouds. These clouds moved all over the world and enriched lakes and rivers with rain. Now, there are almost no clouds. The sun started heating Earth much more. Lakes and seas dried up alarmingly quickly. At that moment, real chaos began. The sun is going down on the horizon. Sunset is near. It's not so hot anymore. The exhausted Wanderer continues walking. In the distance, he notices something that makes him stop, take out a small shovel, and start digging quickly. There's no shelter around, just a flat plain. The Wanderer speeds up, otherwise it might be too late. The pit is finally ready. The man jumps down and covers his head with a cloak. A few seconds later, a strong ash storm passes through the entire plain. The smallest particles of ash can penetrate through clothes and get into the lungs. The wind is so strong that it can knock anyone down. When the oceans dried up, the sun began to burn the surface of the planet. This led to massive forest fires. The flames destroyed almost all the trees. Huge clouds of carbon dioxide and ash formed. Driven by the wind, they travel the world and poison everything around. The Wanderer is sitting in the pit while a terrible hurricane is sweeping over his head. He thinks of his family and slowly falls asleep. Cold wakes him up. Frosty air chills him to the bone. So it's night now. The Wanderer climbs out of the pit and finds himself under bright stars. As soon as the water dried up, almost all clouds disappeared. Factories stopped working. Cars no longer emitted carbon dioxide. Thanks to this, comets and the most distant stars can be seen in the sky. The Wanderer has seen them 1,000 times, but he's still not used to the breathtaking picture. It's like he's looking at the sky through a telescope. An icy gust of wind brings the Wanderer back to reality. He won't survive the night if he doesn't find a warmer place. Before, nights were warmer thanks to the energy of the ocean. Now, as soon as the sun goes down, temperatures drop dramatically. The Wanderer needs to move to stay warm. He starts walking faster. Soon, he notices some lights in the distance. It's probably other looters. The Wanderer goes deeper into the valley. Stars and the moon illuminate his way. Unfortunately, he is running out of energy. He pulls a protein bar out of his pocket, but he needs at least a bit of water to eat it. To digest food, your body needs liquid. If the wanderer eats the bar, he'll only get thirstier. He can't walk and falls to the ground. He checks his pockets and finds a small kerosene tablet. He lights it using a matchstick. A tiny flame protects him from cold. To distract himself from thirst, the wanderer takes out an old MP3 player. He charged it during the day using the solar panels on his backpack. The man puts on headphones. Classical music calms him down. He lies on the ground next to the burning tablet. He needs to gain strength to continue his journey tomorrow. It's morning. In an hour, the sun will start burning the ground again. It's crucial to find water while he still has some time left. The wanderer inspects the territory and notices a spot where the ground is darker. In his previous life, the wanderer worked as a surveyor. He takes a few steps and touches the ground. It feels cool. There's an underground spring here. He begins to dig. The ground is getting wet. Water starts seeping out of the soil. The wanderer fills his empty bottles. Things don't look that bad anymore. It's getting a bit more difficult to breathe with each new day. In the past, phytoplankton and algae produced up to 70% of all the oxygen on the planet, but not anymore. Several days have passed. The wanderer runs out of water and food again. Fortunately, not for long. He's now walking among huge sunken ships. He sees modern aircraft carriers, liners, and even ancient pirate boats. In the distance, he spots huge mountains. The tops of these rocks are what used to be called the shore. The ocean floor is ending. The thoughts about reuniting with his family give him more strength. The man reaches the top and finds himself in the middle of a ruined city. It's empty. Where have all the people gone? Where is my family now? The wanderer asks himself. The man walks through the abandoned streets and meets an old man. He says that almost all the people who used to live here left the city and went to Antarctica. The wanderer has a new goal. He's going to get to the icy mainland no matter what. He will find his family.
China's Yunnan province has a county that's situated right in the valley between two mountains and on either side of the Nanqi River. And this place stretches quite far. It's considered to be the narrowest city in the world. Yanjin County is connected by a few bridges and has many amazing, colorful buildings among the riverbank. In the upper levels of the town, a bit away from the river, there are many shops and restaurants pinned side to side, both traditional and modern looking. You can walk along the road with the river right below you and know that you're standing in the middle of the city. Well, sort of. Technically, the middle of the city are the bridges. The county is 37 miles north to south and 25 miles east to west, including the mountains. The population is almost 500,000 people, and the territory is more than 770 square miles. There are 2 rivers that split into 3 parts. If you're standing on either side of the river, you'll notice how close the other side of town is. Despite the length of the city, there aren't that many bridges around. The main hub is located down by the river, which is at 1,100 feet. The highest elevation goes up to 7,200 feet. Because the city is built in such a unique way, the weather pattern is specific to the county. The summers are really hot, especially by the river, and the winters are very wet. That's all thanks to the geographical location. The town is 100 feet at its thinnest and 1,000 feet at its widest. To put that in perspective, the narrowest part is shorter than an Olympic pool, and the widest is around 7 of those. The city is almost impossible to get lost in, but it even has a railway system to transport people out of town and from one end to another. It's situated slightly above the river towards the mountains and goes through a small tunnel in one of them. You can catch some amazing views while relaxing on a smooth train ride. Because the town is so narrow and real estate so limited, most of the apartment buildings are concentrated along the riverbank. You can literally dive from any balcony and swim in the river. But some of those spots aren't safe for swimming, since the river isn't smooth. The buildings have pillars in the foundation to prevent any potential river flooding in case the water levels rise. The river doesn't exactly flow in a perfectly straight line, but rather a series of jagged turns and corners. So, from an aerial point of view, the whole town resembles a slithering snake. Depending where the buildings are, the first floor will sometimes be found on the fifth. The bottom 4 floors are just pillars supporting the building. Some buildings are quite tall, so you can get some amazing views, while others are closer to the ground. Either way, you gotta admire the creativity put into the engineering. To build a whole town in such a place isn't easy. Besides the town being charming as it is, the cultural aspect is another reason to visit this place. Once a year, the Dancing Flower Festival takes place. A group of locals dress up in traditional clothes in a special space where the dancing is. There's also the old town of Dusha. Even though most of the town adopted modern ways of living, they still keep the old traditional architecture around. This little charming spectacle is more than 2,200 years old and was an important passage linking Yunnan province and central China during the 3rd century. The entrance to the old town combines the ancient architecture with modern designs. At the entrance of the town is the famous Old Pavilion. Walking along its roads makes you feel like you're in the ancient times. They're all rugged, yet still well preserved since they built them centuries ago. And nearby is the mountain scenery, which has limestone peaks covered with flowers and herbs. You can get lost in a natural maze of trees and rocks. This place is an escape from the hustle and bustle of the main town, and isn't so far away either. The town has a deep history and has been populated for hundreds of years. The county was famous for its salt trade, since it's strategically one of the best routes for caravans and traders. But sadly, the economic situation isn't easy for imports today. Since there's only one access road to the town, trucks bringing in goods are always limited. It does well on tourism for foreigners and local Chinese too. The old town of Lijiang is another charming town in the same province as Yanjin. The town is built on an uneven landscape, but adapted to it perfectly. In ancient times, the location served as a strategic point for trade between surrounding provinces, and even connected with the Silk Road. It was also a cultural melting pot between different ethnic groups in the region for over 800 years. So, most of the traditions and architecture are a result of all those years of trading and sharing and mixing different cultures. It's also a good location that gives access through the mountains. The rivers and springs flow down to the town through ancient canals that are still used to this day. The town is divided into the Dayan Old Town, Baisha, and Shuye. Dayan Old Town was considered to be the commercial center for Lijiang. It has amazing architecture that feels like you're in some kind of movie. Many of the buildings have unique tiled roofs and arched gateways, all carved with murals. This part of town still has some of its old landmarks, even today. They even preserved some of the utensils from the past. The Baisha isn't that far north of the Dayan Old Town, and comprises housing units that are centuries old. The Shuye housing is located northwest of the Old Town, and arranged in the mountains surrounded by lots of water. The water system is distributed very neatly and keeps the charm of the town. Here, you can find a blend of many cultures and traditions collected throughout the centuries. The old town of Lijiang is a unity between people and nature. They utilized the mountains, trees, rivers, and architecture to create a perfect harmony for living. The water originally comes from the snowy mountains and flows to the town and supplies the farms. The whole town itself is built around the water, which influenced the style, landscape, urban layout, and everything else in between. Many canals are linked to the buildings and alleyways to make sure the town doesn't go dry. Yangzhou is famous for its bamboo cruise boats for fishing and transportation. It's surrounded by broad expanses of land and mountains in the background. In these boat tours, you can have an up-close experience of the traditional village life and how they fish to sustain themselves. You can even find some unique wildlife lurking around. Besides the river, the town is located in the center of the mountains, with the river not too far away. The marketplace is buzzing with local artisans, displaying their works and art for tourists to bring home. You can find cycling trips in various places and let the cheerful atmosphere sink in. Moon Hill is famous for the amazing panoramic view of the mountain peaks and the rest of the province. You can also check out the water cave if you have an extra taste for adventure. And while you're at it, you can go climbing, kayaking and trekking. To get an even better view of everything, you can catch a ride on a hot air balloon that'll float you to the top and immerse yourself in the beautiful landscape. You can get a view of the stone village perched on top of a hill surrounded by walls dating back centuries. The place is around 1400 years old and is also a mix between different ethnic groups, adding the richness to the culture. Many locals have kept the same festivals and customs, but even though the place has deeply rooted cultural traditions, it's adapted to the modern ways of life.
Miles of land with no clouds in the sky. A little scorpion digs itself underground to escape the heat. No trees or bushes as far as the eye can see. A desert wasn't always like this. Most of them used to be covered with lush green and thick vegetation. Each desert is unique in its own way. It's defined as an area that receives less than 10 inches of rainfall per year. So, with barely any water to support life, the atmosphere is prone to extreme shifts of temperature. That's why a desert can be scorching hot during the day, but the temperatures drop significantly at night. As soon as the sun sets, all the heat disappears, since there's no atmospheric moisture to trap it inside. Jungles and rainforests stay warm at night since the humidity acts as a net trapping the heat. These dry lands are a result of rain shadow. It's part of the weather cycle that creates precipitation. Damp, warm wind blowing from a certain direction hits a mountain and slowly rises up to form clouds. But as it goes higher, it begins to cool, which makes it release moisture. It's technically fog. So, as a result, the other side of the mountain can't retain any humidity. That's how it turns dry and barren. If we look at this on a regional scale, then you'd notice that deserts aren't even located near the mountains. A high-pressure system is when a flow of dry air remains near the surface. They can be found in subtropical or desert places. If the high-pressure system is consistent, then it's not easy for the opposite effect to take place, which causes typical weather patterns. Many deserts aren't even covered in sand. When walking through a desert, you're stepping on millions of years of nature doing its job. When the days are boiling hot and the nights teeth-chattering cold, the rocks tend to break down easily. The dryness and winds cause erosion and contribute to breaking down these rocks, exposing the bedrock underneath. And as time goes on, the rocks get smaller and smaller until the sand is produced. The larger chunks of sand sink to the bottom, while the smaller grain-like pieces remain on top. The wind transfers the sand in multiple directions and on other larger rocks. Over time, the sand constantly rubbing against the rocks will help it erode it until one day that rock will turn into sand. Dunes are the ocean waves of the desert. Sand dunes are unique in that they don't have a consistent shape. One day, you may see a dune sea in front of you, and the next day, it can be gone. Sand almost behaves like water. Try taking some dry sand with one hand and hold a fist. You'll notice the sand leaking out of your control as it spills. Sand is an accumulation of ground-up rocks shaped by the environment, wind, and gravity. Sand dunes can be found wherever there is a large plain of land and wind. So, beaches, deserts, and even abandoned farmlands have them. You can point out certain dunes depending on the vegetation. So, the ones on the beach have different composition and are smaller, but the ones that cover more ground have a flat or rippled surface. In such places, you can find sand sheets that stretch for miles ahead. Sandstorms form closer to the edges of the desert rather than in the middle. With no vegetation to shield and limit the storms, they can get pretty big. The wind starts off slow and then picks up pace, carrying many particles and exposing the ground below. The rest of the particles lying on the ground begin to vibrate. The stronger the wind, the more sand will be in your face. So the particles all bump into each other and carry the rest of them in the air. The sandstorm can be so huge that it blocks out the sun. In 2001, a sandstorm in China moved an estimated 6.5 million tons, covering an area of around 52 million square miles. About 80% of deserts aren't covered with sand, but rather with barren earth. With no plants and rainfall, the sun just bakes the ground as it is and holds everything in place. You can find hills and rock formations in deserts, many of them shaped by erosion. Some deserts have small mountains too, and depending on the geologic elements, the color and hardness of the rock vary. But not any sandy patch of land is a real desert. The common ones are composed mainly of sand. There are some that are classified as pebble deserts, rock deserts, and even snow and ice ones. Cold deserts are found all over the world. The Gobi Desert, the coastal desert of Peru, and northern Chile have those. There is no humidity around these places, so moisture can't be contained to make clouds. The biggest desert in the world is the whole continent of Antarctica. This giant icy wasteland has no rainfall, but dry winds similar to those in hot deserts. Ice and snow cover almost every square inch of the place that's only habitable by scientists and researchers, and a bunch of penguins. In the Sahara Desert, nomadic tribes wander around from place to place. They've been there for thousands of years and only know the desert life. It's estimated that there are only 2.5 million people living there, excluding the Nile Valley. That's 1 person per square mile. In the past, the Sahara had a lot more people. Evidence of stone artifacts and even art designed on rocks were found in various places, but those places are dried-up, uninhabitable areas. Fossils show that the Sahara was once a large network of rivers and lakes occupied by ancient extinct marine animals. That was millions of years ago. But just around 7,000 years ago, the Sahara was more vibrant with buffaloes, giraffes, elephants, and other animals that are currently found elsewhere in Africa. The people back then used to live near large Saharan lakes and relied on fishing for food. They created settlements around them while defending themselves from animal threats. A lot of those rivers dried up, but many remain as oases. An oasis is an area that has a fresh water source and fertile soil surrounded by dryness. People of the Sahara grew crops and planted trees for dates around the perimeter to prevent sand from contaminating the water and destroying the crops. Some of the water was brought in through irrigation of larger rivers or natural springs. There were also underground sources of water. The oasis could be as little as only a few date palms around the body of water to an entire city. They were perfect trading routes for merchants and nomads, often dealing dates, olives, figs, and other commodities. The settlers maintained the oasis for generations until now. Despite the oasis, there were still some nomads wandering around, but both settlers and nomads had domesticated livestock. Saharan people are still specialists when it comes to moving around. Many of them are trained blacksmiths or agriculturalists that follow to where they can thrive and prosper. Even though the desert climate and conditions are hostile for living beings, there are plenty of plants and animals that specialize in such conditions. The Adex antelope is a unique creature that's currently endangered. Its coat is unmistakable, and its horns are beautifully designed. Cool desert snakes that slither sideways disguise themselves in the same color as the sand. If the desert was the ocean, then camels would be the boats. Their humps store fat to cool themselves off when it gets too hot. The two-humped camel isn't native to the Middle East or Africa, but Mongolia and northern China. They have 2 rows of eyelashes for protection and can close and open their nostrils at will. No desert is complete without scorpions. They're extremely common in the Sahara and can grow to the size of your palm. Let's not forget the animals of the frozen deserts. Penguins are common in the Antarctic, as well as the Arctic fox and polar bears. Deserts don't technically grow in size just because sand spreads further. It works when the ecosystem takes over another land by decreasing vegetation and removing the fertile soil, and then you have more desert. So picture this. You're about to endure a 6-hour flight, and right now, before departure, you're sure that you're going to be bored to tears. After all, it's 6 hours of sitting still in your seat with only short bathroom breaks. Sounds tough, but how about doing that for 18 hours instead? Such flights do exist, and they're becoming increasingly popular. People nowadays prefer to get from A to B without any unnecessary stops. It's the nature of our increasingly busy world. But surprisingly, the first long-haul flight took place 20 years ago. On March 1, 2001, Continental Airlines had its first non-stop trip covering a distance of 7,332 miles. In the late morning, the aircraft left Newark, New Jersey and headed north. It traveled over the northern part of the U.S., then Canada, and flew over the North Pole. Then the plane went over Russia, Mongolia, and China, and a staggering 16 hours later, it landed in Hong Kong. People all over the world were elated by this new development since it opened so many possibilities for fast travel. A lot of business travelers have frequent trips to these two leading financial centers of the world. But before 2001, there hadn't been any non-stop commercial flights that could make such trips more convenient. Funny enough, just several days after the first flight from Newark, United Airlines started their own service to Hong Kong. But since their planes departed from JFK Airport, this airline set a new record because the distance was about 2 miles longer. Nowadays, the champion of long-haul travel is Singapore Airlines with their flight from Newark to Singapore. Just imagine, the longest commercial flight in the world lasts 18 hours and 45 minutes and covers over 9,500 miles. That's longer than the Earth is wide. I'll bet it seems like it too. Well, if long-haul flights are so frequent nowadays, why do people still search for connecting flights? Well, that's a good question, and the answer is money. Let's have a look at an ultra-long-haul flight, say from Singapore to New York. For these flights, Singapore Airlines uses an Airbus A350-900 ULR, which stands for ultra-long range. There are only 7 of such airplanes in the world, and they can cover a distance of 9,700 miles without making a pit stop. But not so the passengers, I'll bet. But while the standard type can carry 253 passengers on board, its ultra-long version seats only 161. You may think that's kind of weird, but the thing is, there are no economy passengers on these flights at all. Business passengers occupy 67 seats, and 94 cater to those in premium economy. You see, more passengers and more seats mean more extra weight for the aircraft, and carrying more weight leads to using more fuel, which means pit stops. See how it's all connected? Anyway, passengers in business and premium classes pay more for their tickets. So, in the end, airlines don't lose anything from operating such insanely long flights halfway around the world.
You pack up your bags and head to the most remote island in the world. You can't stop jumping for joy, knowing you'll have an island all to yourself. Destination: Bouvet, the loneliest place on Earth. There's no airport on the island, so all those who have a fear of flying can just relax. This lonely island is located in the Atlantic Ocean between South Africa and Antarctica and is frozen all over. It's uninhabited, so there aren't any humans for at least 1,400 miles from here. And even though you won't find any coffee shops or theaters, the island hosts a decent number of animals, like seals, birds, and penguins. And no, there aren't any forests or jungles, but you can find some moss and lichen. Right now, you're on a ship wearing a thick jacket and cupping hot tea in your hands. It's been days since you left the coast of South Africa. Finally, you see the island out in the distance. Many frozen cliffs surround it, so it's really difficult to scale it. Maybe a helicopter could do the trick. The place was pretty popular back in the day and was named 3 times since its discovery. But not even the smallest piece of land goes homeless for long. So Norway decided to keep it. They even gave it its own internet domain, .bv. But no one has created any websites under it yet. As of now, the place is mainly used by scientists to study whale migration. Tristan da Cunha is a small volcanic island in the Atlantic. It's quite lonely too, but this time you can actually find some settlers. Its closest neighbors are Buenos Aires in Argentina and Cape Town in South Africa, both of which are more than 1,000 miles away. Just like Bouvet, this place doesn't have an airport. You could catch a ship from Cape Town instead, for a 7-day voyage costing you between $800 to $1,500. Be prepared for a long visit. These ships don't come and go every day. You may find yourself booking a place for an entire month before going back home. There's no mistaking this place with its giant 6,700-foot volcanic cone, which actually erupted in the 1960s. Luckily, they were able to evacuate everyone to a neighboring island in time. This little piece of land is home to no more than 280 people and has its own decent economy to sustain itself. About 1,300 miles south is St. Helena, a more vibrant and hip island because, guess what? It has an airport. Planes fly all the way from South Africa once a week. But there's a trick. Pilots have to be specially trained to land in the mountaintop airport. The country is smaller than Rhode Island, the smallest state in the U.S., but what it lacks in real estate, it makes up for in its rich history. Napoleon spent his final years on the island, and it's also home to the oldest tortoise in the world. Population here doesn't exceed 5,000 people who love to enjoy the beach and the amazing highland scenery. In 1790, a group of British and Tahitian sailors reached a chain of islands in the South Pacific in the middle of nowhere. Seeing as they were stuck and loving the isolation, they decided to create a settlement on one of them. Later, these land spots would be called Pitcairn Islands, and still, only one would be left inhabited. The population? 50 people. You can find a mix of cultures between British, Polynesian, and other Pacific Islanders thriving and living life to the fullest. And why wouldn't they? All 4 islands have incredible subtropical climates and rich volcanic soil for crops and vegetation. In 2016, it was labeled the world's 2nd largest marine protected area. Be prepared for a long sea voyage if you plan on paying a little visit. You can catch a ride on a supply ship that hosts 12 passengers each trip. 2,500 miles off Africa, in the southern part of the Indian Ocean, you'll find Amsterdam Island. No, the capital of the Netherlands didn't pack up and sail away. This remote island is home to an extinct volcano that rises to about 3,000 feet, and the place itself is only as big as a mall. There are no permanent residents, but it hosts scientists and a research facility, around 30 people. All the way north is the Norwegian archipelago of Svalbard. Seems calm and peaceful, with people enjoying their days. Except, wait, get back inside. This place is known as Polar Bear Island, where the bear population outnumbers the human one. You may arrive by plane or ship, but either way, you'd be getting a breathtaking view of snowy mountains and cute, colorful buildings. Despite the curious bears, people have been able to maintain a stable life there, and the island is actually home to many nationalities from over 50 different countries. Svalbard welcomes anyone to stay and live without a visa, as long as they have some place to stay and a job to make a living. It's located roughly 500 miles north of Norway in the Arctic Ocean. But where isn't the only tough question. It's when you go, too. If you're not a nocturnal type, then consider going there in the bright half of the year, where you could experience sunlight nearly all day, every day. Because during the other half of the year, there's total darkness. But you'll get to witness some beautiful northern lights right above you for quite a while. Svalbard is considered the most northern settlement in the world, and actually has the most northern university as well. Because of the permafrost, life isn't easy here, which means they get most of their stuff on ships from abroad. But that didn't stop the dwellers from having the global seed vault to host almost 1 million seeds from around the world as a backup, in case crops can't grow anymore. Off the coast of Chile is the easternmost presence of Polynesian culture. 2,300 miles west of South America and 1,200 miles away from Pitcairn Islands, the most famous island inhabitants are known around the world for their huge heads. Yeah, those heads. More than 600 are scattered across Easter Island, but archaeologists dug deeper and discovered that their bodies are buried beneath the ground. The island is also known as Rapa Nui, or the Great Rapa. It doesn't have white sandy beaches, but the dry sunny spots and amazing ashen cliffs were formed by the lava from volcanoes. North Sentinel Island is a beautiful paradise with just one problem. No one is allowed to enter it. There's a native tribe living there, untouched by any outside civilization, and everyone decided to keep it that way. Over the last 200 years, several dozen people were able to get a hands-on experience with the islanders, but let's just say it didn't end well. It's even completely off any shipping route to avoid contact. 10 years ago, a study indicated there could be between 80 to 150 people on North Sentinel, but there really is no way of telling, since that number could be as low as 15, or even exceeding 500 people. They're so isolated that the people in the neighboring open islands don't understand the Sentinelese language. Some researchers were able to pick up little snippets of their lifestyle. They live in huts with slanted roofs and fire pits facing each other. They have a healthy seafood diet and live on fruits that grow on the island. There isn't any harbor, but soft sandy beaches as far as the eye can see. Too bad we can't get in. Tuvalu is a young island country in the west central Pacific, made up of 9 small coral islands placed in a chain-like formation. The main island is only a few miles long and is so narrow at times, you can ride a motorbike with ocean waves striking on either side. It's pretty rare to see cars around as well. The locals are mainly of Polynesian descent and speak Tuvaluan, but you can easily get around with English. The country has an airport, but when there are no flights, the entire landing strip turns into a football field and playground for everyone to enjoy. Despite not having many tourists, Tuvalu is known around the world for its own web domain, .tv, which it leased to a Canadian television company. Makes sense to me.
The Amazon River, the boat, and dense jungle on both sides. All is silent. Only the engine is revving, and you look around nervously under the earnest gaze of the Peruvian guide. Suddenly, the man smiles and points ahead. This is it. You've finally arrived at Iquitos. The city is hidden deep within the Amazon rainforest. On one side, Iquitos is surrounded by water, and on the other lies thick, impenetrable rainforest as far as the eye can see, making this city extremely difficult to reach. First, you had to fly to Peru's capital, Lima, a vibrant coastal city. From there, you traveled by bus through Peru's vast jagged mountains before being plunged into the heart of the Amazon rainforest. 3 days into this bus journey, you reached a small town where the road suddenly stopped. At over 140 square miles, Iquitos is the largest continental city in the world that cannot be reached by road. You're still over 200 miles away from Iquitos, so from here you take a boat ride along the hot, humid Amazon River before finally reaching the remote city 5 days after you left Lima. When you arrive in the city, you notice many of the houses are built on tall stilts. This is because, in the springtime, the river surrounding Iquitos swells up, submerging parts of the city in water. For this, Iquitos has been nicknamed the Venice of the Amazon. The stilted houses are tall enough to avoid the murky waters of the Amazon River. You hear loud buzzing coming from all around the city. It sounds like a gang of bikers have arrived. In reality, these are motocarrios. There are very few cars in Iquitos. Instead, they have motorcycles with small passenger cabins attached to them. There are around 45,000 of these things whizzing around Iquitos, making the city very noisy. Your trip to the most isolated places has just begun. So, you head to Norway and arrive in the capital city Oslo. Immediately, you hop on another plane. After a 3-hour flight, you land at the world's northernmost public airport, Longyearbyen. You step off the plane to see a small and colorful town enclosed by snow-topped mountains. There's no settlement further to the north than this. Longyearbyen translates to the Long Year Town, named after its American founder, coal miner John Longyear. You take a walk along the coast of the small town. The water is a beautiful crystal blue. You decide to dip your toe in to test it out. Ow! Bad idea. The average temperature of the water here is 32 degrees, making it ice cold. In the distance, you can make out a fuzzy white creature. It's a polar bear. In fact, it's a group of them. In Longyearbyen, polar bears famously outnumber humans. Around 3,000 of these animals populate the area compared to the human population of 2,300. Finally, the sun sets. You grab a blanket and sit back to take in the stunning view of the northern lights. Now, imagine you're walking in the scorching heat across Egypt's Great Sand Sea. You've been walking for miles, hours, days even, dreaming of water, greenery, and a place to rest, when suddenly you come across a small settlement with olive groves, palm trees, and even freshwater springs. This isn't a heat-induced mirage. It's the Siwa Oasis, an Egyptian city of 23,000 people and a miracle of nature. You travel here by flying to Egypt's capital, Cairo, and then embarking on a lengthy and desolate bus ride across the desert. When you finally spot some greenery amongst the sand, you have reached the Siwa Oasis. After refreshing yourself in the cool waters of the springs, you explore the city further and come across ancient ruins. This city has existed since 10,000 BCE, and many historical remnants can still be found there today. Amongst these ruins, you notice there are newer buildings. These are where the modern-day Siwi people live. You spend some time with the Siwi, a friendly and unique community of Egyptians. They tell you all about their city. The Siwa Oasis is located in the middle of the Sahara Desert, and due to its harsh climate, it's one of the most remote cities in the world. You notice how dry the air is and how scorching the sun feels. Reaching highs of 118 degrees Fahrenheit, this heat makes the Siwa Oasis a difficult place to live. It's time to travel to a more balanced climate. You head northeast and arrive in Russia's capital, Moscow. From there, you take a flight east again, traveling further and further across Russia until you're closer to Alaska than to Moscow. You've reached the city of Petropavlovsk, which translates to City of Peter and Paul. The first thing you see are giant mountains surrounding the city, cutting it off from the rest of the world. These mountains are in fact volcanoes. In this far eastern part of Russia, there are more than 300 volcanoes, including 29 active ones. These volcanoes stop any roads from reaching Petropavlovsk. The city depends on flights and boats to import supplies. You turn away from the volcanoes to stare out at the blue, shimmering ocean. The water looks nice, so you head down to the beach where a crowd of sea lions are sunbathing along the sand. Petropavlovsk is home to incredibly diverse wildlife. Just off the shore, you can see a whale fin poking out of the water. You explore the city's diverse landscape. You go to one of the city's ski resorts and spend the day on the slopes. Then you hike up a rocky path to the base of one of the city's many volcanoes. Finally, it's time to relax on a boat tour around the island to see the city's famous Three Brothers rock formation. Feeling inspired, you travel to another volcanic land, Chile's Easter Island. The island doesn't have a harbor and only one airline flies to the remote land, so you travel an entire day to Santiago, Chile. Then you climb aboard a small plane to fly to Easter Island. You walk among the high cliffs of the barren island and come across its famous monuments. These are giant, mysterious statues of human heads. They're called moai and were carved by the local people around 800 years ago. You inspect the earth beneath your feet. It looks and feels very dry. Easter Island consists of 3 ancient volcanoes. The volcanic soil makes it very difficult to grow crops or vegetation. Some of the city's trees were cleared hundreds of years ago to make way for the stone monuments, giving the island the empty look it has today. You embark on a boat ride 1,100 miles west from Easter Island. You reach a small green land floating in the Pacific Ocean. This is Pitcairn Island. You might recall that this place played a major role in the mutiny on the Bounty. You come down from the boat and begin your journey to reach Adamstown, the center of the island where its 43 inhabitants live. To reach Adamstown, you hike the Hill of Difficulty, a steep and rocky 200-foot climb to the top of the island. Now that you've finally made it here, you can explore the diverse and unique nature of the land. Pitcairn Island is home to the largest marine reserve in the world. You take a snorkeling trip and swim alongside all kinds of exotic fish. You explore vibrant coral reefs and even catch sight of a rare humpback whale. Dreaming of the great days of the old Wild West, you decide to travel to Supai, Arizona. To get to this Native American settlement and fragment of the past, you drive along America's famous Route 66. You stop, seemingly in the middle of nowhere with only desert land as far as the eye can see. Then you follow an 8-mile walking trail to reach Supai. You hike down into the Grand Canyon, almost 3,000 feet deep. You come across a stunning waterfall spilling over the cliffs of the canyon. This is Havasu Falls, a popular tourist spot, famous for its vivid blue-green water. After a further mile's hike, you finally reach Supai. Over 200 members of the Havasupai Indian tribe reside in the small town. It's often referred to as the most remote town in the United States. To your left, you see several mules making their way across town with packages on their backs. Because no roads lead to this small settlement, mail is delivered by a mule train. Without it, it would take the average mail carrier a 16-hour hike to complete this route. You walk around the area and come across many more towering blue waterfalls. The untouched nature and great views of the Grand Canyon make the long hike worthwhile. After a beautiful sunset, nighttime falls, and there are no lights for miles. The land is lit up by the countless stars shining overhead. I hope you're hungry. In Taiwan, for $1, you can get a bowl of delicious oyster noodle soup. This country has world-famous night markets where you can find plenty of street food to fit any budget. When you're traveling, you don't want to be weighed down with a bunch of heavy clothes. You probably won't even wear half of them. Save some luggage space and find a good laundry service. You can wash around 1 pound of clothes for $1 in Malaysia. Oh, and I almost forgot. You can get some nice local breakfast for the same price too. If you find yourself in the Caribbean and you want to buy some pirate corn on the cob, it's a buccaneer. Hey, that joke cost me $1. Do you think it's possible to buy 10 eggs for the price of $1? You can in Malaysia. Wonder why they sell eggs in groups of 10. Which $1 option would you choose in Vietnam? 2 nice cups of local coffee, 5 local newspapers, 1 year of insurance for your motorbike, a good hair wash, or 4 delicious rolls. And now we're talking. If you're in Indonesia on a budget, you can always get a full meal of chicken porridge, meatballs, and chicken noodles. And if you need some help back to your hotel, a motorbike taxi will cost you around $1 as long as it's a short enough ride. In Bangkok, Thailand, there's a long-tail boat that takes you from one side of a wide river to the other. And for $1, you can ride on it a whole 6 times, back and forth, back and forth. Are your feet swollen from the flight? Give yourself a 30-minute foot massage in the Philippines, something you can actually get for $1 over there. Hello there, Sri Lanka. While there, you can buy a 5-hour bus or train ride across the island for about $1. If you don't feel like traveling all over, search for some local places to try their traditional coconut pancakes for the same price. Meanwhile, in Armenia, you can choose between a huge pack of flour, a big sack of potatoes, or 3 loaves of bread. What would you even do with all that stuff? Hey, how about Turkey? Not the Thanksgiving one. Only got a few coins in your pocket? There's a nice cup of Turkish tea waiting for you. It's actually the most popular hot drink in the country. Or if you want to eat something delicious, you can have a piece of the sweet pastry baklava. Okay, $1 won't get you the biggest piece ever, but it's still worth it. A hot dog for $1? That's not a trap. It's the real price you can actually find on the streets of Macedonia. Meanwhile, in Croatia, you can get a ticket for public transportation, local newspapers, or a scoop of excellent ice cream. Oh yeah, and a cup of cappuccino at a local coffee shop too. Speaking of a good coffee, yes, Italy. Need a slap-in-the-face espresso after your all-night party session? No problem. You'll have to search around a bit for some less touristy places to get it for $1, but it's doable. If you're in Rome, looking for something to see, you'll definitely want to snap a couple of pics at the Colosseum. It's actually free, but there are local actors dressed up in gladiator uniforms, and it's customary to tip them at least $1. Not your thing? Pick up 2 bottles of water for the same price. But wait, we're still not done with Italy. Why not go completely wild and spend another $1, this time to buy a house? Yeah, you heard me right. Okay, to be precise, these houses cost €1, so that's going to be around $1.20. But still, you could try to bargain with them. And no, it's not that real estate in Italy that's insanely priced. There's a story behind it. Italy's trying to attract new residents back to their tiny towns to increase the population. People have been moving out of these areas, headed for the cities to look for work. These towns just want to bring some life back onto their streets. Moving to the UK now. You can definitely find something for $1. The question is, how do you handle it? How about a $1 pickled egg? Yup, an egg boiled and then pickled in vinegar. It's a classic over there, usually served as a side dish for fish. When you're in London, you can visit most museums for $1. Okay, you got me. Museums there are mostly free. So, a whole bunch of pickled eggs, anyone? Now, you can't visit France without tasting an authentic baguette. But the fact that you can get it for $1 makes it even better. Baguette is the French word for stick, and it's one of the most famous French products. There was a law passed in 1920 that banned bakers from starting work before 4 a.m. or from working past 10 p.m. The bakers had to come up with a fast-baking bread to feed to everyone, and ta-da, that's when the baguette showed up. Iceland is a beautiful country, but also one of the most expensive in the world. There aren't many things you can buy for $1 in Iceland, but milk is the exception. How about a good old bag of chips? This afternoon snack cost about $1 in Ireland. Smoky bacon flavor for me. In Luxembourg, you can get a 1.5-liter bottle of water for this amount. Yeah, not a lot going on over there, but still an interesting country. It's the only Grand Duchy in the world. whatever that means. There's not a lot you can get for $1 in Belgium either, but okay, chewing gum might come in handy. In Finland, you can get access to a public toilet, but if you ask nicely, the coffee shop down the road might help you save $1 on that. Poland has a traditional dessert that looks like a donut, and 2 pieces cost $1. The dough is rich, fluffy, filled with jam, and covered in powdered sugar. Traditionally, they eat it on Fat Thursday. In the States, people went crazy over it too, but we eat it on Fat Tuesday. Tuesday, Thursday, potato. I'm up for a couple of these any day of the week. If you're visiting Switzerland, you're going to need a bit more than $1, but okay, you can go to a deli and taste a really tiny piece of Swiss cheese, just to see what you've been missing. They might not even charge you. Another thing you can get for $1 is, maybe 1 apple. Maybe. Pincho. It's a traditional Spanish snack, usually just bread with toppings like vegetables, pickles, or meat. They sell it everywhere, but the good local places that sell it for $1 are usually hidden in the non-touristy areas. All that for just $1? Not bad. In Germany, find a pretzel, eat it. No, it's not that kind of pretzel. It's a freshly baked bready thing that's all kinds of delicious. Or you can buy 400 cotton swabs if you're not hungry. It's a nice sunny day in Sweden. You're taking a walk, enjoying your day, and you're in the mood for something refreshing. For $1, of course. Ooh, an ice cream popsicle. Okay, you totally got me. I'm in. Going to Brazil? Great. $1 there can get you a glass of fresh orange juice. Or even better, if you don't feel like walking around with your backpack all day, get to the nearest bus station. They have lockers there, so you can ditch your stuff and head straight for the beach. Time for Colombia. In the capital, Bogota, you can get coffee with 2 biscuits or an arepa, a traditional corn delicacy that comes in different flavors. Then, more coffee. If you're wandering around New York City, you might just be able to find a tasty slice of pizza for that price. It just might take a while. Are your car or bike tires flat? Well, you know the price for using the air pump. Need some string, some buttons, a few balloons, or something equally random? Head to the 99-cent store. And in Canada, you can buy lettuce. In Costa Rica, you can get a whole watermelon, papaya, or pineapple. And in Tanzania, a nice potato omelet. Now, at first glance, it seems like we're on a giant raft called a continent that's just floating around on some molten lava until it hits another continent. Okay, let's make a quick stop at high school science class. Ooh. Our home planet is like a cake with different layers of ingredients stacked up on top of each other. The Earth's core, mantle, and crust. Hey, where's the frosting? The cake batter on top represents the crust of the Earth, made up of 3 types of tasty rock: igneous, sedimentary, and, say it with me, metamorphic. These rocks are formed in different ways, such as from solidified lava or from the deposits of particles and minerals. The crust is what we stand on, a home to our continents, oceans, and everything we see around us. Then you have the mantle, not the baseball player, the layer that lies right below the crust. Many people think that the mantle is just lava, but it's not quite like that. Just like how you mix different ingredients in the cake batter, the mantle is made up of different types of rocks that are constantly moving and shifting. And finally, we get to the sweetest part of the cake, the center, or in the case of Earth, the core. It has 2 parts, the outer and inner core. The outer core is made of molten rocks and metals that are incredibly hot. Ow! Even hotter than the surface of the sun. The inner core is solid, even though temperatures there are crazy. It doesn't turn into liquid because the pressure down there is amazingly strong. When you see all this, you can easily think that below us there are endless miles of lava and hot rocks. So, how come tectonic plates move at all? The continents don't float on a sea of molten rock. The oceanic and continental crusts really sit on a mantle. Sure, there's a layer of liquid rock in our planet, the outer core, around 1,800 miles below the surface, but it's separated from the surface by the mantle that's thick and solid. So, the Earth's tectonic plates move around because they're on a thick layer of solid rock, the upper mantle. Basically, this rock is under incredible pressure and heat, which makes it flow in slow motion over time. Think of it like honey or syrup that you pour over your cake layers. As you move the cake around, the honey or syrup will also move and flow. Similarly, the upper mantle can flow and drag the parts above it along, just way slower than honey. And the rock is both breakable and flexible. It can crack and break like a cookie, now I'm getting hungry, but it can also stretch and bend like a piece of taffy. When the plates get caught on each other, they can't move anymore. But when they break free, they start drifting again, like puzzle pieces shifting around until they find their perfect fit. Extremely high temperatures and pressure are the reason this flow happens. It's like a big pot of soup on the stove. As the soup heats up, it starts to move around, carrying heat from one spot to another. Is it lunchtime? And speaking of lava, it's not just molten rocks that travel all the way up from the outer core to volcanoes. When tectonic plates come together and one slides underneath the other, they create a lot of heat and pressure while grinding against each other. It's like rubbing your hands together fast and they start to get hot, or when you start a fire with rocks. And as the melted rock, or magma, rises to the surface, it can create volcanoes. Now, long ago, the Earth's land was not divided into continents as it is today. Instead, there was one giant landmass known as Pangaea, meaning all Earth in Greek. Whoa! Imagine being stuck in the middle of this giant ocean. So, over time, this supercontinent slowly broke apart. Its parts drifted away from each other and formed the separate lands we call continents. This idea first popped out in the 16th century when one cartographer realized the coastlines of Africa, America, and Europe appear like they could fit together like puzzle pieces. Later, researchers realized the rock composition of their coastlines was similar, which means they used to be part of one giant mass, and they call that the theory of continental drift. At first, people were pretty skeptical about that idea because they didn't know how such massive lands could move around. Now, we'd all be able to explain that part, right? So, the Earth's crust is divided into a couple of large plates and many smaller ones. All of them are still moving, even though it's in slow motion. We can't sense it, and we won't see any particular changes during our lifetime. It's a process that lasts hundreds of millions of years. As the plates move, they interact with one another in fascinating ways. For example, when two plates collide, one may be forced beneath the other, which would help create a subduction zone. Over time, this is the way you get many cool things like volcanic islands, trenches, and even entire mountain ranges. Plates apparently started moving around 3.5 billion years ago. It took them a while to group into the first jigsaw supercontinent we know about called Ur. Today, its remains make up parts of Madagascar, India, and Australia. Pangaea formed 335 million years ago, but it probably won't be the last continent that will form. So, some new generations in the distant future could live on something called the next Pangaea. When the oceanic crust of the Atlantic Ocean slowly takes its place under the continental crust, the oceanic basin of the Atlantic is going to close, which is why the continents will end up pulled together. This means the Americas will meet Africa, and Eurasia will be flipped on its side. So, people might live on a giant landmass in the shape of a ring, clustered around the inner sea, or at least what's left of it. Or maybe continents will take another direction and make up a different jigsaw puzzle called Amasia. In this scenario, the Americans will drift westward, fuse with Australia, and pivot to around Siberia. And then there's more. Novo-Pangaea is the option where the Americas swing together to embrace Antarctica and Australia, and Africa legs off to the northwest. Basically, all continents here get together to form a giant landmass that stretches from one pole to the other. Ready for one more? Nah, come on. A recent projection called Eureka gives an idea similar to Novo Pangea. It's just that all continents here unite to become one gigantic land that clusters around the equator. Maybe this would be my favorite one to live at, with the sunny weather and the beach all the time. And who knows what kind of magnificent trenches, mountains, islands, and other geological beauties we'd get with this giant supercontinent. Pangea broke up about 175 million years ago. As the Atlantic and Indian Oceans began to widen towards the east, the Ring of Fire was formed. It's a path that goes along the Pacific Ocean with so many frequent earthquakes and active volcanoes. This way, Eurasia was unable to cross this border and continue moving westward. And now Eurasia could move laterally along the Ring of Fire. The subduction zones kind of act like a barrier that forces the tectonic plates to move in different directions. So Eurasia could eventually collide with the Americas and form something similar to Amasia. It would be cool to sit there, grab the popcorn, and watch it from the side. But this is something that won't happen for the next 50 million years at least. I'm willing to bet I probably won't be here to see it. Different theories talk about different positions where this new supercontinent might end up one day. But it seems it will probably be somewhere in the polar area, centered on what we today recognize as the Arctic Ocean. Not my cup of tea. Bring me back the sunny one. Wait, scratch that. Let's go eat. Hey, look at this rock. At first sight, it looks like a regular boring rock, the likes of which you can see when walking along the beach. Its color doesn't stand out, and its weight is pretty regular, around 4 pounds. But everything changes when you learn that this rock was born on Mars, traveled all the way to Earth, and ended up in Antarctica. Now the story sounds much more fascinating. So let's find out the details. Researcher Roberta Score, who worked on the ANSMET project, which stands for Antarctic Search for Meteorites, of the Denver Antarctic Program, found this meteorite in 1984. If you want to decipher the name of the space traveler, I can help you. It comes from the place where the scientists spotted it, the Allen Hills of Antarctica, hence ALH. And then we've got the year of the discovery and the number of the sample. If you think that Roberta picked up the rock and exclaimed something like, "Woohoo, I'm holding a chunk of Mars," I'll have to disappoint you. At the very beginning, it was totally unclear where the meteorite came from. And one thing confused researchers even more. The meteor was very different from other meteorite groups found on our planet. Okay, but then how did they finally figure out it was a visitor from Mars? All thanks to traces of gas similar to those that make up the atmosphere of the red planet. We learned about its composition thanks to the brave Viking lander that carried out the necessary analysis in situ in 1976. Anyway, back to our rocky discovery. It's actually very special, and not only because the rock arrived from far, far away. Among those several thousand meteorites found on Earth, just around 100 have likely come from Mars. And even so, our guy is different from them and seems to be part of a separate group. So let's go into the past and follow the life story of this cosmic traveler. It most likely formed around 4 billion years ago on its home red planet. One day, which wasn't very different from others, turned out to be life-changing for this peaceful rock. A meteorite impact catapulted into space, and it started its own journey as a small asteroid. At that time, it was way larger than at the moment of discovery on Earth. At one point, ALH got close to Earth and, who knows, probably decided to explore something. That's how, 13,000 years ago, it ended its space journey by colliding with our planet. At the moment, this Martian fragment is the oldest we've got. But at first, it wasn't all that popular. Only in 1996 did it become way more famous after a groundbreaking discovery. You see, some NASA researchers started wondering, well, the fragment is obviously very old, but then, could it have recorded any traces of life that could have been thriving on Mars at the time ALH formed on the red planet? And guess what? Those scientists turned out to be right. They detected traces of very fine magnetite particles. Those were completely similar in structure and chemical composition to the particles we have on Earth. They're called magnetofossils, and magnetotactic bacteria produce them. So it might mean that, at one point, there were some forms of life on Mars. In April 2020, scientists from the Japanese Space Agency made another discovery. They detected nitrogen containing organic material of Martian origin in our meteorite. So, who knows what new, astounding secrets further examination of the meteorite might reveal? At the moment, though, all you can do is travel to Antarctica and find more of them. The thing is, this place is great for meteorite hunting. Surprisingly, we have found nearly 50,000 meteorites in Antarctica, and hundreds of thousands are still waiting to be discovered. Each of these space rocks can tell us a story of the evolution of the solar system. For example, the very first lunar rock found on the icy deserted continent proved that chunks of space objects larger than asteroids can also end up on Earth. So, let's say you got inspired and decided to go meteorite hunting all the way to Antarctica. Well, get ready for some serious challenges. Despite their potential abundance, finding space rocks isn't as easy as it might seem. You'll have to visit remote areas, and there's still no guarantee that you'll be able to spot a meteorite. And that's actually a huge problem. Meteorites are vanishing from sight. Currently, scientists find about 1,000 meteorites in Antarctica each year. But according to a new study, about 5,000 more get hidden out of sight every year. The culprit is warming temperatures. Worried scientists created a model that could help them figure out where those meteorites might surface. This model was quite complicated, taking into consideration snow cover, surface temperature, the speed at which ice flows, and even the steepness of the terrain. After that, they ran simulations under various warming scenarios. It turned out that meteorites indeed sank out of sight as temperatures rose. To say that the researchers were upset is obvious. They didn't expect that climate change would affect their work so much. Even though those areas are below freezing, people still managed to ruin a crucial archive of the solar system. But let's get back to your meteorite hunt. If you want your chances to find one to be higher, travel to the base of mountains or outcrops where ice, which usually flows to the lower ground, is forced to move upward. But make sure to take your windbreaker with you. In those places, powerful winds brush away snow, exposing bright, vivid blue ice. Instead of melting, this ancient ice can change directly into water vapor, and it helps expose meteorites that would otherwise remain hidden. You need to hurry though. Meteorites at the surface disappear quickly. Even when temperatures are well below freezing, the rocks can still absorb some of the sun's heat and melt the ice. It's like they're creating underground, or shall I say under ice, tunnels for themselves, sinking and hiding from sight. Sometime later, refreezing closes the entrance to those tunnels, effectively trapping meteorites inside, tucked out of sight. Now, scientists admit it's very tricky to find working methods to spot meteorites. And if we don't hurry and develop such methods, we might lose between 80,000 and 250,000 space rocks in total. No wonder scientists are on a mission to find more meteorites. They're focusing on meteorite stranding zones. Those are places where meteorites often gather on the surface because of specific features of geology, ice flow, and climate conditions. As you already know, you can find meteorites on blue ice without snow cover. This makes meteorites easy to spot. But finding such hotspots is often pure luck. Or you gotta sit day and night, scouring maps and satellite images in attempts to spot blue ice zones near research stations. Let me introduce Veronika Tolanov, a glaciologist, and her team. They've taken things to the next level by developing a smart Antarctic-wide map. To do it, they've used machine learning and satellite data from NASA, the Canadian Space Agency, and others. This map highlights areas where meteorites might be hiding based on past finds and all kinds of climate and ice data. Apparently, the best places to find meteorites are along the edges of the continent and near mountains with blue ice. Unfortunately, it's not just the blue ice that matters. The temperature and speed of the ice flow are also super important. For example, if the ice flows too quickly, meteorites get swept away before they can accumulate. So, if you want to find a meteorite, you have to wait for very precise conditions. The surface temperature has to stay below 16 degrees Fahrenheit almost all the time, otherwise meteorites sink. You can start with the Allen Hills region. Yup, that's where our ALH friend was discovered. This area is kind of a meteorite gold mine with more than 1,000 finds. But there are even more promising places, like the Fimbulheimen Mountains, and no one has searched there yet. You might be the first. In any case, with this new map, researchers developed a where-to-go index that ranks the best meteorite hunting spots, making future field trips much more targeted. And with plenty of blue ice regions still unexplored, there are tons of meteorites just waiting to be found. So, what are you waiting for?
Antarctica is the most remote continent on the planet. It has 90% of the world's ice, but it's considered a desert because the annual rainfall is only about 8 inches. You'd probably never think it was a desert if you look at it, since it's white and full of wildlife. But Antarctica is not only what it appears to be on the surface. There is so much hidden beneath it, and even above it. Atlantis has long been a mystery for humankind. Did it ever exist? And if yes, where was it located? One of the theories supports that the Atlantean civilization could have thrived and flourished in the Antarctic continent when it was still uncovered by ice. Due to the Earth's cyclical eras, this is the periods of ice and interglacial periods. It was believed that Antarctica was actually a tropical forest. And, well, a recent Google Earth picture found some interesting ruins, buried deep within a lake bed on the icy continent. It's unclear to which civilization these remains belong to, but some theorists believe that it could perfectly be Atlantis. And these frozen Antarctic lakes are holding much more under them. In the 1970s, scientists were surprised to find large lakes under the ice plaques in the frozen continent. Over 400 lake beds are believed to exist under layers of ice. Lake Vostok, for instance, the largest subglacial lake over there, is buried beneath 2 miles of thick ice. There are pristine blue ice caves hidden under there as well. The water in these lakes remains liquid due to the small levels of geothermal heat from the Earth's core. And some scientists believe that some lakes are around 15 million years old. Talk about the old days, huh? Now, amongst the unique phenomena that occur in the continent, let's say Antarctica is home to an extremely weird waterfall. The year was 1911 when Australian geologists wondered about the so-called blood falls. He was extremely puzzled by this red stream of liquid pouring from a small hillside amongst the Antarctic ice. After years of studying it, it was understood what caused the redness was the high iron content in the water. The last piece of the puzzle came when scientists discovered that there was an underground lake with water full of oxidized iron nearby, which was what caused the blood fall to exist in the first place. And speaking of puzzles, this image might be quite puzzling. After all, why on earth would anyone need to take cash to Antarctica? Well, a little history first. Back in 1956, the US founded McMurdo Research Station, which is the biggest science hub in the continent to date. At its peak, the McMurdo Station hosts from 200 to 1,000 scientists. And these people need money to buy coffee, pizza, and other things to meet their daily needs. That's when Wells Fargo decided to install an ATM there. Oh, and they even set a Guinness World Record this way. The Wells Fargo ATM at McMurdo Station is the most southern one in the world. And it's the loneliest ATM in the world as well, as there isn't another one for hundreds and hundreds of miles. The freezing temperatures in Antarctica can make the continent hostile to human life. Actually, Antarctica is the coldest, driest, and windiest continent on our planet. The average temperature along the coast is around 14 degrees Fahrenheit, but as you head towards the Antarctic hinterlands, it gets even colder than that. The interior of the continent can register temperatures of around -71 degrees Fahrenheit. On the bright side, these freezing conditions can account for some mesmerizing phenomena, such as ice bubbles. These bubbles frozen inside some Antarctic lakes are bubbles of methane gas. The gas released from the melting of glaciers ends up freezing midway and makes for a beautiful and exotic scene. I guess methane never looked this pretty before, did it? A few years ago, scientists were taken aback by a giant hole the size of the Netherlands in one Antarctic lake. For scale, that's more or less the size of Lake Michigan. These holes are called polynyas, and they are a natural phenomenon in the continent. However, this one is the biggest scientists have ever seen since the 1970s. So you'll understand, polynyas are massive holes in a sea of ice. Most of them occur along the continent's coast, but this new one was found in the Weddell Sea, much farther from the shore. Scientists are still trying to understand how that happened and what its implications are for the climate in the region. There's one feature in the continent that looks completely man-made and has even sparked several theories around the world regarding its origins. I mean, this formation looks exactly like other man-made pyramids, doesn't it? The only difference is that this is actually a natural rock formation and has existed for a very long time. It was first found during an expedition in the 1910s and was kept secret ever since. It was nicknamed Pyramid, but its correct scientific name is Nunatak, which is simply a peak of rock sticking out above a glacier or an ice sheet. There are other famous peaks that look pyramid-shaped, such as the Matterhorn in Switzerland. So no, this really isn't a human construction. We're sure of it. And the list of fascinating discoveries on the ice continent goes on. An artificial intelligence program was analyzing a set of data on Antarctica when it came across a stunning discovery. There may be up to 300,000 undiscovered meteorites to be found in the icy field of the continent. The truth is, meteorites have been falling on the continent for millions of years. But it was only 110 years ago that the first one was found. And guess what? Recently, researchers found a Martian meteorite in East Antarctica. It was the biggest one found in the last 25 years, and it weighed about 165 pounds. Now, usually fire and ice are rather a tricky combination, so I'm guessing you wouldn't say that Antarctica hosts an active volcano, right? But it does. The volcano, known as Mount Erebus, is the southernmost active volcano in the world with liquid magma and lava boiling for eons. Actually, Mount Erebus has been active for over 1 million years, and it's Antarctica's second highest volcano with a height of 12,000 feet. We've mentioned before that Antarctica wasn't always icy, but could you imagine a huge rainforest covering the entire continent? This isn't science fiction, it's actually true. Leaf impressions and fossilized wood clearly show signs of tropical trees in the region. Fossil research has also revealed something magnificent. Antarctica is home to the oldest worm in the world. According to National Geographic, sperm fossils found in Antarctica reveal a long-extinct species of worm that is around 50 million years old. Scientists claim that this discovery is beyond important to studying some evolutionary relationships and say that this was only possible due to the freezing of such samples for thousands of years. Antarctica is a continent rich in biodiversity. Penguins, polar bears, and seals are just some of the animals we know that exist down there. But there is also a rare and fascinating species of fish that inhabits Antarctic waters. Popularly known as the see-through fish, this species is as bizarre as it is beautiful. This fish had to adapt to survive the cold water temperature in Antarctica, so much so that it evolved into a unique being. As well as a transparent body, this fish has transparent blood, making it completely see-through. This is because they lack the protein hemoglobin, which gives blood its red color. Pretty neat, huh? When you think of Antarctica, you probably think of icebergs, right? So here are some fun facts about it. Did you know that icebergs have a lifespan of about 3,000 years? And that together with Greenland, Antarctica is one of the world's primary sources of icebergs. Icebergs can reach 600 to 700 feet below the surface of the water, and around 90% of an iceberg is hidden underwater. That's where the expression tip of the iceberg comes from.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.